All right, we're here. Hey, everybody, this is Nick Sands. Welcome to Nick Sands Presents, the live show where I invite a bunch of people on to talk. I don't really, there was no, there was no clever statement. How's everybody doing today? I am here with three amazing people to
All right,
talk about something
we're
called.
here. Hey, everybody, this is
Oh,
Nick Sands. Welcome to Nick Sands
I'm
Presents,
getting
the
like a
live show
double.
where
Oh
I
no,
invite a bunch
what
of
is
people.
this?
Technology.
There was no clever statement. How's everybody doing today? Okay, I think we're good now. Okay, I think we're good now. All right, so I'm here with Aaron Ham, Latrice Taylor, and Brittany Sunderman, and they are representatives of the Peace Corps. Well, I guess they're not. Are you? Can we say you're officially representatives or not really? No.
Return Peace Corps
Okay.
volunteers.
They are Peace Corps volunteers who have agreed to come on and talk with me during Peace Corps Week. So this is like your guys' like birthday celebration kind of party time, right?
Yeah, it's our Easter week for Peace Corps.
I'm actually really excited about this because I think I think the Peace Corps is something that people hear about, but they don't necessarily know what it is, and I'm really excited to, and myself included, even though I'm friends with Aaron, who loves the Peace Corps and is a huge member of it. I still don't really know what the Peace Corps is, so I'm excited to learn and to pass that knowledge on to other people. But before we can do that, how do you like that segue into this unbelievable ad read for our sponsors over at Empire Mortgage? Hold on, let me pull it up real quick.
We love a sponsor. Get them in
Thank
there.
you so.
We all understand this. We all get this. Without sponsors, we'd go nowhere. So sponsor away. We're here for
This
it.
is the first sponsor I've ever had, so I really want to do a good job.
Yeah.
Are you tired of dealing with grumpy mortgage lenders who make the process of getting a home loan feel like a root canal? Well, look no further. Empire Mortgage is the cure for your lending woes. Michelle and her team have the perfect mix of positive attitude, great personality, and industry knowledge. That's right. They've got all know-how to make sure you get the mortgage that's right for you. They've got the know-how to make sure they get the mortgage that's right for you. I can personally attest to the warm, friendly environment Michelle brings to her business. Working with her is a real pleasure that makes you feel comfortable and confident in the loan you get. Call them today and discover what sets them apart from the rest. Your new home will thank you. And now just some quick legal stuff I need to run through real quick, and they're just very official numbers that I have to say. NMLS number 1929987, licensed by the state of New Hampshire 23340 MBR. Personal license number 148215, equal housing opportunity. And that's it. That's the end of the ad. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Empire Mortgage. And that's the end of the show. I'll talk to you guys later. No, I'm just kidding.
Thank you very much.
Taking a bow.
So I guess the first question that I have, and like just to jump right into it, is like, what exactly is the Peace Corps? Like, what's a good? What would you say is like a good definition of what it is and what you guys do?
I mean, I can like go through what is like maybe like the textbook definition.
Yeah,
So like the
government
people,
organization that.
yeah, like we're to promote world peace and like friendship. And there's three goals that we're supposed to focus on when we think of those things as volunteers, which is like help people of interested countries and meeting their need for trained peoples, which is like we don't go to countries and tell them, hey, we're going to come send some volunteers to you. The countries themselves come to us and say like, hey, we'd like some support in technology or agriculture or English language. So they reach out to the US and develop a relationship in which volunteers then go. Second goal is to promote a better understanding of Americans on the part of like the peoples that we serve. And then to help promote a better understanding of other peoples back to America. So, there's a lot of misconceptions both ways for all the different places people go. And until you meet people from those places, it's really hard to learn about those places. And so it goes both ways. Like we become friends with the people of which we serve, and we take those experiences and what we've learned back home to the people that we live with or live around. So like those are the three main goals, and that's like the textbook definition. But ultimately, like Peace Corps is to promote peace, and we do that through building friendships.
That's amazing. I don't think I realized that this was a government program. I thought it was like a private organization.
No, but
Government.
yeah, it's a U.S. government program that was started by JFK in 1961. Aaron, already mentioned the reason why, to promote a better understanding, mutual understanding between countries. We have had, or the Peace Corps has had over, close to 250,000 volunteers serve in that time. Before COVID, and I don't know the exact amount. So what I should say, over the course of the lifetime, we've served in over 170 countries. And I looked it up today. We are currently, they've just started reinstating volunteers in countries this year. And so they're in a little over 60 right now.
Wow.
And we should
How many countries
explain
are there?
that, we should back up and explain that back in March of 2020, when the pandemic hit, worldwide, every single Peace Corps volunteer received a close of service within a 2-week period and was sent back to the United States. And so for like Senegal, like we had never had an interruption in service of Senegal, or the country in which I served, but COVID happened. So interruption of service. So like they're having to open up countries again, little at a time, and get volunteers back in and start training them and get them situated. So Latrice, you said there's like 60 something countries. Like we'll probably work back up, but it can't happen overnight. So it's not like all countries just open right back up to us. We have to rebuild the programs and the training.
How many countries are there, like total, in the world?
Dude, I'm looking it up. Right
Is it 147 or 174? Man, my dad was.
We were
What is it?
serving in 173, but
Yeah, that's why I was curious, because I for some reason I thought there was 164 countries, and so that means like you guys have served, or like Peace Corps has served in countries that no longer exist.
195 countries in the world.
Oh, is there? Oh, fuck.
and what's very interesting, I don't know about you all, but remember when you were learning world history in high school? Of course, I was probably in high school a lot further back than you all. You thought you knew all the countries in the world, and then you serve in the Peace Corps, and then all of a sudden you're starting to like kind of look at geography, and you're like you're wondering to yourself, where'd this country come from? Or I thought this country was named something different. And then you start learning about the history and the disruptions and things that have happened in these countries. Name changes, new countries are born all the time.
Or like why the northern part of a country speaks Spanish and the southern part of the country speaks French. You're like, yo, explain this. So
I could probably name 15 countries total, I think.
That's probably more than the average American.
I'm gonna be 100%.
So.
You can do better than that.
Geography
That's
is not my
pathetic.
jam.
You could do better.
I think it was only a few months ago I learned Toronto wasn't a country. It's part of Canada. So. No, I'm just kidding. That's just a joke.
Oh my God.
So you guys are so Peace Corps as a whole is like a thing. And how did you, Brittany? How did you discover the Peace Corps for yourself?
Well, first of
Love that
all,
intro.
I got. Oh man. Well, Peace Corps was an interesting thing for me because I applied and then they didn't want me. They were like, "Bitch, you're not ready for this shit." And then I like went on with life. I like made life decisions. I started a career. I moved out to Seattle. Life was good. But then it started and I had a Spanish teacher that we had to volunteer for the Spanish class. And so I started teaching like GED classes, and I was like, oh, this is cool. And I was like, okay, this is kind of Peace Corps-y. Like, let's do this. But I wanted to travel. And I wrote my like entrance thing, I'm so good, like an MBA type entrance exam. And the Peace Corps was like, sit down, be humble. And so did life. And then I worked for a construction company called Kiewit, and they do these volunteer little programs. So we went down to Nicaragua and we built a bridge. And there was a few Peace Corps volunteers that showed up, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we're like in the Peace Corps." And I was like, "Oh, wait, that always sounded really cool." And they were like, "Well, you could do it, like apply again." I was like, mind blown. You're right. Fuck corporate America. I want to go to the Peace Corps. So then I applied, and I said I'd go anywhere doing anything. And I chose like 2 other countries because you can kind of select. But then I said go anywhere doing anything, and I got chosen to go to Costa Rica to do community and economic development. So we like to say Costa Rica is more of the posh poor.
What exactly does that mean, community and economic development, when you're like, what was your like actual job when you were down there?
Oh, okay. She has one of the coolest projects I've ever heard of, and her photos and like the way she talks about it, I'm just like, oh. So I really hope, like, please talk about the pizza.
Okay, well, community and economic development means whatever you want it to mean, right? So I went around to my whole town. You get 3 months when you get to service, and you have 3 months to like figure it out and go talk to your people and interview and really analyze what this community needs / what they want. So I went around and I'm like, "Hey, I'm the new white girl in town. Like, hey, how's it going?" And I'm in a little town of like less than 500 people. And so everybody knew everything that's going on. And yeah, it was just like interesting. But basically what I ended up doing is working with senior citizens every week. And we were doing Zumba and stretching out and amazing things. And then my host mom does a lot of quilting, and so I wrote a grant. I mean, this bitch hand sews everything together. My mother at home likes to sew me clothing, and like life is good, we have quilts, but to hand sew all of that, I learned a whole different realm. But so it was like that sort of project. Yeah, I mean, I was like, amazing. But the big one was this oven. I hooked up with this NGO back in Minnesota. She's a returned Peace Corps volunteer for Costa Rica, and she goes around and builds ovens. And so we applied to do this oven, and we now have like this self-sustaining pizzeria. So basically, like, what I'm getting at is community and economic development means, what is the town willing to do, and what can I bring, and what can we accomplish? Because there's other programs that are like youth development or like teaching English. They're assigned to a school, and they have to be there for 20 hours, or they have to do this. And community and economic development's like, "Hey, here's your town, here's your people, do something about it." And you're like, "Okay, bet. Okay." And so, and I mean, all this stuff doesn't happen until year 2. I mean, you really getting to know a community. I mean, like Aaron was kind of saying, you're in it for the relationships, and nothing is going to happen for you until you get that. Until you've had a million coffees with a million people, or you've made friends with a 6-year-old and a 95-year-old woman. You know, you're being vulnerable to a community, and they're willing to do things with you if you're willing to just go for it. So I didn't care if I was comic relief. I was considered the gringa loca con las nalgas grande. They'd always talk about my huge ass. I'm like, sick. But you know, the ways you get in with the community, it was like, that's okay. This is fine. This is community development.
That's amazing. Latrice, how did you find the Peace Corps, and what was your like sort of road in like?
So for me, I think I first heard about the Peace Corps as a young girl growing up in a household that initially didn't have TVs, but I grew up with my mom and my grandparents. And they were always listening to talk radio, right? So I have a feeling that's kind of the first time I heard about the Peace Corps. When we did get a TV, my grandmother always was watching Christian broadcasting. So there was always shows about missionary work around the world. And so I developed an interest in traveling. And then my grandmother, she was always giving to someone for some reason. And so I developed kind of a social conscience. But, growing up, graduated in 1988. Before the internet, before, cell phones. And so the Peace Corps was something that I felt like hippies did. I didn't know anyone. I really didn't know anyone who traveled outside of the country other than to Mexico. So I joined the military.
Wait, can I interrupt you for a second? I'm sorry. You graduated in 1988?
1988.
I thought you were younger than me. What the fuck?
You look amazing.
What have you been doing?
Jeez,
I
right?
aged like
You'll be
milk.
fine.
I graduated in
I
2006.
took the long way around, you guys.
Holy
I took the
shit.
long way around. Let me tell you.
Jesus
No,
Christ.
you meet her in person and you're just
Holy.
like,
All right.
gorgeous.
All right,
Not
that was
only
all.
seems to,
Continue.
Like, the chest up, she's gorgeous.
Okay, guys.
Holy fuck.
Holy fuck,
Thank you.
though.
All right. You notice I didn't interrupt Brittany to say that. Sorry, Brittany. It's not you.
Oh my goodness.
Okay. So, anyways, carry on.
So I joined the military, served for 22 years. And at that time, I was still trying to figure out, what I wanted to do when I grew up. And I thought to myself, Latrice, you love to travel. And you now you still have this social consciousness, that is in the back of your mind. And so I thought I would join the Peace Corps to be a little bit more empathetic. Become a little bit more empathetic, get a little closer to, working in international development programs. And either Brittany or Aaron mentioned earlier that you can. So I think, what I should say is that a couple of days ago, I was on a show where they were talking about, your life's purpose. And someone was talking about the fact that she really is trying to switch, into a different career field, but no one believes in her. And quite honestly, when I was preparing to retire from the military, my bosses were saying, what, you are getting to the best part of your career. I was a lieutenant colonel, right? So getting to the best part of your career, why are you trying to retire? I specifically remember the deputy coming out of her office and me saying, I think I want to join the Peace Corps. And like, she looks at me, she gives me a weird look, and she literally turns around, walks back in her office. All my friends were joshing me about, living in my little hut, for it took 4 years, right, from the time I decided to when I joined. And so I applied for urban ag volunteer in Senegal, a community service, volunteer in another country in Africa, and then health, because I was a lab technician when I was in the military. So health volunteer position in another, and I got picked up in Senegal as an urban ag extension, which is basically teaching sustainable gardening and field crops, rice, millet, sorghum, things of that nature. And so that's kind of how I ended up in the Peace Corps.
Wow, that's cool. Was it like sort of, I don't know how the military set up first, the Peace Corps, but when you got to the Peace Corps, was there like that sort of like routine or like that sort of like feel of like hierarchy that was comfortable when you got in? That was like,
it was so funny because I know Aaron and Brittany, you guys both probably remember this, right? So when you first get to the Peace Corps, we had 2.5 months worth of training. And so they teach you safety, they teach you security. Medical comes to see you several times, not only, to give you shots, to give you checkups, but talk to you about, medical in country. They teach you your job. So sustainable ag practices, they talk to you about culture, they teach you the language in Senegal, right? And so when I first got to Senegal, it was hot, let me tell you. And I was always exhausted. And so I remember sitting on a stool. I don't know where I was, what I was doing, but the training manager comes around and he says, something to me, and I said, you know what? I retired from the military to get away from this. You know, and this training that you guys have us going through makes me feel like I'm still in the military, because it was, you know, a session every hour on the hour with a 10-minute break. So that was very reminiscent of the military, which was actually very good. I think that, you know, Peace Corps Senegal has a very good program and provided a good foundational training for us when we arrived.
Erin, how did you find the Peace Corps, and what brought you into the Peace Corps?
So I was 14 when I first heard of the Peace Corps. I was watching TV one afternoon. You have to understand, I kind of grew up in a bit of an unusual family. I always say that my mom raised me with Jesus and my dad raised me with Gandhi and Martin Luther King. So like my dad's agnostic or atheist, and my mom was raised like hardcore Southern Baptist, where like you sing without instruments. Like that's how they made it work. I don't know how they made it work, but they did. And so my dad didn't really let me watch anything but like PBS. Eventually we got Nat Geo as I got older, so I was allowed to watch Nat Geo. I grew up watching C-SPAN. Like that was my afternoon entertainment, was watching Congress pass bills. It was
Nice.
that was my life
Big
growing
hit at
up.
parties,
So
I'm sure.
yeah, it's super fun. You can also tell that like my brother's 10 years older than me, so I was basically raised as an only child. And so like I feel like my idea of relationships is also a little weird. But I was watching PBS and there was a woman on, and they were doing a documentary about her and her team. She was the only female on the team, and she was a doctor of what apparently was physical therapy. And she and her team of doctors traveled around in like a kind of a circuit, you could say. And they would spend like 3 months in one community, 3 months in another community, and they had like 7 communities, and they would just circle them. And they were like on a 3-year stint or something. And she was the only PT and the only female. But I didn't catch the whole thing. So like at some point in that week, I had a teacher say, like, I want a 2-page paper from y'all on a job you're interested in doing when you're older. And then like we built off of that as a project. And that was what stuck in my mind. I'd been thinking about it ever since I saw that clip, like that 30-minute clip of that woman. So I was sitting at the dinner table and trying to write this paper, and my dad was like, what are you writing about? And I was like, well, I don't know what the title of this job is. So I explained to him what I saw, and he was like, it sounds like that might have been the Peace Corps. Side note, Peace Corps doesn't like take on doctors and teams like that. Probably saw something maybe like Mercy Ships or something to that effect. It was not Peace Corps. Peace Corps doesn't have teams like that. But like my dad didn't really know either. And he's like, I bet that was maybe Peace Corps. Heard Peace Corps, and I stuck with it, man. Like for the rest of my life, I stuck with it. I was like, Peace Corps, that's it. I want to be that woman. Like from then on, I wanted to be like a physical therapist in the Peace Corps for like the rest of my life. That's how big an impact that 30-minute segment of PBS had in my life. But when I graduated from undergrad, I graduated in 2007. So like we're really still picking up steam in a war. The markets are crashing, like everything that's going wrong, is going wrong. And my parents looked at me and they said, we know you want to do this, but like, would you please respect our request to not do this right now? They're like, you're a white, Christian, female, American. Like, let's keep racking up all the things that are the cover of your textbook that probably don't look great to the rest of the world right now. Like, maybe this is not the time. So I pulled my application that I had turned in, which I turned it in at that time in 2007. I had turned it in on paper. And I like went back to the office and I was like, hey, let me like take this application back from you. I then proceeded at different points in time to fill out the application completely online and never hit submit. I did that 3 more times. So that was 4 times total. And then when I was 35, something really big happened. And I was like, you know what? Everything about timing seemed right. So I filled it out. I hit submit. I think I actually hit submit when I was 34, but it took me almost a full year to go through the medical process before I was approved.
Do you mind if I ask you what that big thing was?
Sure. The big, I guess it was that I was working, I'm from Texas. I was working in Texas and I was doing legislative work. And I realized like I had this moment where I could see my future in just 5 years, like not even like 10 or 20 years, like just 5 years. And it felt like this really bleak future. I was like, what are you accomplishing that you wanted to accomplish in your life? Like, you're doing all this volunteer work, but like, you don't know your community and they don't really know you, even though you're volunteering at the same places all the time, every weekend. You don't really, I had like 3 friends to my name, which if you think about it, 3 friends is amazing. And at the same time, I wasn't seeing them, but maybe once every other week if I was lucky, and especially not during legislative session. During legislative session for 140 days, I didn't see them at all. So I just really had that perspective hit me really hard one weekend, and like really, really hard. And I remember just like it was really emotional. And I was like, this is not the future that 14-year-old me planned. And I was like, 14-year-old you would like come and slap the crap out of you right now. Like, get it together, girl. Let's make 14-year-old you really proud. And that was like the defining thought. I was like, 14-year-old you is not proud of you. Make 14-year-old you proud of you. And so that's how I did it. I was like, okay, this is it. This is happening. So I applied. So ended up in Senegal, West Africa. I actually followed right behind Latrice. So Latrice had her spot, and I like followed right behind her and took her spot. As she was leaving, I took over her spot.
Did you guys meet there? Like,
Yeah.
did you kind of like work together as like to ease in and out of the process, or?
Yeah, there was a little bit of overlap, which was super wonderful. I was really fortunate to have her because she was like, here, hold my hand while I help you train. And then she like released my hand and was like, have a good day. You're going to be great.
And then just got on a plane and just headed back.
No, actually, she'd extended for a year. So she was still there, but just not in my community.
Oh, that's awesome.
She was in country. Yeah.
So what was it? It must have been kind of interesting going from working with like the government, legislative, like, and then going to like, really you're kind of doing the same kind of political work, right? Like just on a more of a grassroots level. Like it's still kind of the idea of like working for the government that I just recently found out. But like you're it's sort of in the same vein, but it's like a much more hands-on experience, I'm guessing.
I mean, it's true. Like, I still had to watch what I posted on social media, right? Like, maybe I had a little bit more leeway in my posting, but like, still had to like watch what I said. And because you're never like off, you're never really fully off and on break when you're in the Peace Corps. If you say something, it can reflect poorly back on the peoples of which you serve, or back on your government, even if you don't mean for it to, even if you're just blowing off steam. That's like, you never want that to happen. So like, I still had to like do what everybody else did, which was like mind their P's and Q's. But it was really nice not to have to like wake up and put on like the Calvin Klein dress and the 3-inch heels and a full face of makeup and do my hair. It was really liberating to like go and wear like a regular cotton dress. And I didn't wear any underwear because like
same. I never do. It's just
yeah, you eat like women don't wear bras or underwear, and guys ended up not wearing boxers because you sweat so much that like your bands of your bra, or like where anything where there's like rubber like on a waistband for the guys, if it would sweat and they would like rub raw and sometimes get infections. So like a month in, we were all like looking around, we're like, anybody wearing any underwear? Anybody? And we're all like, no. And we're like, oh, okay, none of us are. This is great. So that was super liberating.
You guys all talked about like the 2-month training period. Is the 2-month training period specific to like where you're going, or is it more of just like an overall kind of like everybody gets the same training?
It's like, well, so you get in and you have like a day in the US in a specific city. Everyone meets up. So I had my staging in Atlanta. And so you all get to Atlanta and you all look at each other and you go, I don't know who the fuck you are. And you're like roommates, and then everything's like.
Do you already know where you're going at this point?
You know you're going to a country,
okay.
Yes. But you don't know like specifics within that whatsoever.
Gotcha.
So then you're just getting on a plane with all these randos and Like, I mean, really, it's kind of crazy to look back, and now you're like, I mean, these people know me through and through, ridiculously. But the first time I saw like one person, I remember I thought they were on staff. I'm like, who is this person? They were not. Um, but so you get in country and then you go do all these language tests. They're trying to figure out, like for me, Spanish in Costa Rica. I feel like Senegal might be a bit different, but you get there, you do these language tests, and within that, your training community is based on your language level. So then within like our community and economic development courses, we'd all come together like 2 or 3 days a week. But other than that, for the rest of the week, we were in our training communities, specifically doing 8 hours of our level of Spanish. And then the other community was doing specifically 8 hours of their level. And so everyone then, because the crazy part is, they don't tell you this, that they'll kick you out within 2.5 months. I mean, you are not considered a volunteer. You have to graduate. You are a trainee for this amount of time, and you have to meet your language requirement. And if you do not, you are getting sent home. So you've just quit your job, sold your car, quit your life, and then you're coming into this. And like, honestly, I had no idea that that was even like, whoo, thankfully that's okay. But, you know, there's a lot more specifics that you're actually, and I mean, you're going through all these, they're watching you, you're watching them, you're in this host family. It's a very interesting environment. And then when you graduate, whew, that's quite liberating, I shall say.
Is it ever so like I definitely didn't realize that it was so like they were so picky. It seems like you have to be like you have to really go through some shit to even get into this.
Big time. And I mean, we like lost quite a few people right in the beginning. It was like, you know, they don't get along with their host family, out. And then this person, they're not really vibing with this, out. I mean, they're kind of a liability. It's like benched. I mean, kind of crazy.
Well, we when I arrived, we arrived with over 70 people. So what? First of all, Senegal is one of the largest Peace Corps. I always forget the word for.
Cohort?
Yeah, no, it's countries in the world. Not stage, but
Well, but like our
both?
we have the most amount of volunteers in country, but our stage groups are also.
yeah, and so we arrived with over 70, and at that time we were the largest stage to arrive, and we lost 20 volunteers, and so various reasons, right? So one thing that I would say, you know, if volunteers are going to areas that are extremely hot, don't arrive dehydrated, overhydrate yourself. Because if you arrive dehydrated, you will not be able to catch up. So immediately we were losing people in the first week. People's diets, you know, in Senegal, they eat a lot of rice, they eat a lot of fish, and they eat vegetables. There's no way around it. So if you have issues with, and you guys forgive me, I don't know all the different, if you're a vegan or if you're a vegetarian, you know, or if you can't handle rice, then, you know, it might be really hard for you to survive. You know, it's a different culture. And so some people, you know, can't get past the culture shock, right? So you're eating together around a bowl. You know, in Senegal, you have Turkish toilets, squatty potties. It's hot. There's mosquitoes. There's flies. You know, there's no AC. And so volunteers go home for various reasons, you know, inability to progress, you know, you can't pass your test, you can't pass your language test, like she said. And so we had a lot of volunteers that got sent home before we finished training. But then once you actually get to village, your city. So some people were in villages, which, you know, 300 or so people. I was actually in a city. Once you actually get to your site, is what we call them. You still have people leave, you know, they might have just not realized what Peace Corps service was when they got to country. I've had volunteers that were more mature, like myself, arrive in country and say, I thought they were literally going to partner me with organizations. I thought they were going to set me up with, work. I didn't know that I was going to have to come to country and find the work myself. They didn't realize that they were going to have to live with families. And in Senegal, it's one of the only countries where you actually have to live with a family. You have a mother, a father, sisters, brothers, cousins. So for various reasons, volunteers get sent home.
Is it first of all, what's a stage? A stage? You said
a stage is a group. So it's just the group that you arrive with.
What's the main language in Senegal?
The French is it's the national language, but they are, one thing that's really cool, and Brittany alluded to this earlier, is so when you actually arrive, they are assessing you to see. So for some of us, older, they're like, oh, you need to be closer to the medical team. So we're not going to send you out to the Netherlands. So if you're closer to the medical team, we know that you're going to be speaking the language that's in that region. For others, if you're going to be in northern Senegal, there's a language there. If you're going to be in southern Senegal, there's another language. So it depends on where you're going to be. And so they assess you for the language that you're going to be. And I forgot where I was going with you, what question you asked.
My question was just what's a stage?
Oh, a stage. Yeah, so it's the group that you arrive with.
Is that just French, or is that?
Yes, okay. It's so national language is French. So they don't teach volunteers French, though. They used to try to teach the national language and a local language, but it was too hard for volunteers to learn the language in 2.5 months. So now they just teach a local language. And let me tell you, when you learn a language in the US in high school versus when you learn a language in the US Peace Corps, these volunteers, especially these young volunteers, are kicking ass. They are graduating in 2.5 months. And a month after, they are rolling with that language. And literally my farmer partner just told me last year that my language arrived. He was like, Latrice, your language has finally arrived. And I left country in 2019. Everyone else is losing their language and mine has finally arrived. But those volunteers were kicking ass when it came to that language. I mean, I am so proud of them.
Aaron and Brittany, have you guys held on to your language since you have not been in country?
Yes, I really, really enjoy speaking Spanish. Yeah, I just really like it. And then I was actually down in Cabo for a bachelorette party a few weekends ago. And then when I'm getting feisty, that's when it really comes out. Because then there's just no shame in a language, right? And you're just like motor mouthing. Oh, but I was getting shit for free. I was like, damn, I still got this. This feels good, But I feel like, Spanish is so useful. I'm very lucky to have the language because, yeah, if you're an indigenous language or, it's like sick at the time, but to be able to have a language that's really spoken by 97% of the people on this earth, that's pretty cool. And I talk to my host family a lot. I ended up living with them the whole time. I really adore them. And yeah, I just like keeping up with it. And sometimes I've only seen Coco in Spanish. I refuse to see it in English. And, I just
Now, wait a minute. Say that again. You only say what?
Coco, the movie. Well, they have the Spanish version. And I originally saw it in Spanish because I was down there. And the music's all different. It's all in Spanish. And it's, to me, it's so much better. So then karaoke, I'm just going to do the Spanish version. So I've only seen it. And when you watch on Disney Plus, it's specific Spanish version and English version. It's not just the subtitles,
That's really cool.
So,
that's learning a second language is something I feel like it's one of those things I've always wanted to do, but then just never got around to it. You know what I mean? I've never really had a reason to, I guess. Although you say that, but I feel like there's always a reason. Once you have that ability, you probably find reasons to use it all the time, right?
Yeah, and the thing is okay, so we also have a friend in our cohort, Kiana, and she's in our program, and she was in Kosovo. And when we like commands, I'm just saying stuff in Spanish because that's just what I normally do. And it's just like commands. And she knows a little Spanish. So she'll pick up on that. Well, through that, she'll respond in Albanian. And now I'm like, choosh, choosh, like speaking some Albanian. And then, like, if we're at the store, she's like, Shaka Stone. And then I'll answer, and she's like, see, I know what you're saying. I'm like, this is sick, man. This is awesome. And then what's crazy is in Macomb, Illinois, there's this Euro shop that is fucking dank. And this owner knows 11 languages. They're from, they're from Albania. And my boss at the city, so I worked for the city of Macomb through the program, and he was a Peace Corps volunteer in Macedonia. And he's like, oh, we got to go to this Euro place for lunch one day. We'll take Kiana, we'll do Turkish coffee. Okay, sick. We all show up, and this man is speaking Macedonian. Then he talks to Kiana in Albanian. And then he looks over at me and starts talking in Spanish. And I'm like, whoa. And he rotates through all these languages. Like, how are you living in Macomb, Illinois, keeping up 11 languages? Like, who is these minute languages? And he's like, oh, and I speak Russian to like this one guy. And it's like, it's crazy how people can really keep up with that. Like, their brain just clicks.
Totally agree.
Erin, have you held on to your languages since you've been back?
No, unfortunately, so during training, my language was Wolof, and Wolof is based on Latin. And I actually took 4 years of Latin in high school. So like once it really started clicking in my brain, like I would line up everything in Wolof with like its counterpart in Latin with the rules. And I was like, cool, you know the rule, you can do the thing. You know the rule, you can do the thing. That got really easy for me. And I was really thankful, like my brain clicked into that. I was like, oh, thank you that I got Wolof and not like Serere or Pular. I would have just face planted all the way back to America, because they're beautiful languages, but they were wicked hard. Like our people who learned Pular, I was like, or Mandinka, I was like, yo, what? But I actually got sick during training, and I was in the Capitol in the like med bay for a week during one of our like most intensive language training segments. And I was way behind. So actually everybody in my stage swore in like the last day of November, I want to say. And then I actually stayed an extra week with like 4 or 5 other people who also didn't pass their language exams. And we had intensive week-long training with our like communities language, whatever we were assigned with. And I got a fantastic teacher for my like last week. Her name's Mom, and she's brilliant. I mean, just a fantastic teacher in general. She figures out and would teach a different style to whatever her students' needs were. And she like just would figure it out. She was great. And I mean, my parents are educators, and I'm sorry, Mom and Dad, but Mom was like 40 times better than anybody I've ever met. Any of my professors I've ever had, any tutors I've ever had. She's phenomenal. And so like I got my language like I actually did really well when I tested the next time. I like tested higher than like anybody else when I like got done with that week. So that made me feel really good. But then I was like really only good at talking about either nutrition or ag stuff. And I couldn't really talk about anything else. And I didn't have the language for much else, which is okay. Like that's how that goes, right? You can't be 100% when you walk into community. It's like, well, gotta learn as you go. So I found a Wolof tutor, and I actually didn't learn as much from him as I was learning from my littlest sister. My littlest sister was going blind. And so I was trying to help her learn to read and write before she like officially went blind. So I was having to learn French. So there was like French in between my English and my Wolof, and there was French in between her Wolof and my Wolof, because my Wolof had like such a thick accent, nobody really could understand me at first, but I spoke with my little sister so much, she would literally sit next to me and repeat what I said, but with like a proper Wolof accent. And so like all the adults would be looking at my little sister like half the time. No, they're like, oh, this is what the foreigner's trying to say. Okay. But we left country. I tried to stay taking lessons with Mom. And then once I realized like we weren't getting reinstated in like another couple of months, I was like, oh, I don't know what to do with this. So I just stopped. And I feel so many sorts of ways about that because Latrice keeps up with Sheikh and has like wonderful conversations with him and like hears about his family and the community. And I actually lived with Sheikh's sister. That was my host mom. And so I get to like get updates, but I can't do anything more than greet, which in Senegal is a huge deal. Like, no lie, that's a really big deal. So that's great. But like, I can't do much more than that. So if I wanted to go back and work there, I would call mom up in a heartbeat and be like, I need daily lessons. Let's get this going. So yeah.
I think what's something that just sort of I just picked up on just now is like I was thinking about Brittany, you had said that like your big thing was you had like made this oven, you made this community oven, like this community pizzeria. Like Aaron, you're talking about you helped a little girl who was going blind like learn the language, right? So like I think at least for me when I was in kind of thinking of the Peace Corps, I was thinking of like, you know, like macro, like you guys all, you know, I think about like sort of volunteering in the States where, or like charity work in the States where it's like, you know, big, you know, you go to a giant fundraiser and everybody gets fucking, you know, shrimp and then, you know, there's like an auction, right? But like you were helping a little girl. Yeah, exactly. You were helping a little girl like learn to read. Like that's fucking, it's such a small act like in the grand scheme of things, but to her that must have been such a massive thing to have someone do that. That must have been like, I don't know, that's just a really cool thing. I felt weird just kind of glossing over. I would just kind of want to touch on it.
I will say there are some volunteers, and Latrice might remember who this was. They referenced this person, but this person had a very micro level way of thinking about their ag communities, and they built some sort of like rice or corn co-op amongst multiple communities. And then like, even though that specific volunteer wasn't the one to go take the idea to other communities and build co-ops, they had this idea, right? Like they grew up as like, I don't know, some Midwest kid who was like, I know what a co-op is. I can help them build a co-op. They told their community this idea because the community was saying like, we need to stabilize how we buy, sell, and trade our, you know, food resources. And the person was like, co-op. That's a, you know, how you do it. And then everybody's like, what's a co-op? They built it, got it going with their community. I should not say the volunteer built it. So let me back up and say the volunteer helped be a resource to build that. It took a very long time, got it going. It's still going. But then like the people in that community went to other communities and taught them how to do co-ops as well. So like that person did have a very micro level way of, or macro way of thinking about it. It's just that what I saw and what I was able to do was like this thing, right? So like everybody's service is very, very different. You never know what people are going to say their project was. Like somebody back in the day in the 70s started a fair trade coffee company in their community in like Costa Rica or wherever it was. And it's still going to this day from the 70s.
It's pretty cool. Do you know what the name of it is?
I wish I could remember. They told us in training.
I just want to tell you guys that I've never interviewed 3 people before. And so if it feels like I'm like, like I'm fat, I'm quickly changing to other people. It's just so nobody has to sit for too long without talking. So if it's awkward, I apologize in advance.
You're doing great. You're doing great.
I appreciate that. I am really surprised. The most shocking thing I hear is that they just sounds like they just drop you in the country and then they're like, figure it out. Like that's pretty wild. So there's no, like, they don't have any kind of plan or anything for you when you go in. They just, it's kind of up to you to find a project and do it.
Latrice can explain this really well, I feel like.
Yeah, hit it, girl.
So here's the deal. When you arrive in country, they teach you all of the technical knowledge that you need, right? And they provide the framework for you. So you have a framework going into village or to your city, right? So it's not that they just drop you in country or in your village. It's they drop you in and they say, spend some time getting to know the people in your village or your city, right? identify what their needs are and what they would like to work on, and then pick a project. You know, if I had to say anything to or provide suggestions to other volunteers going in, pick one project and do it well. I wanted to do everything that everyone was talking about. So pick a project, you know, work with the community to kind of fully develop it. And we have the opportunity to write grants. So if you need to write a grant, go ahead and write the grant and submit that through the Peace Corps, you know, and then work it. So it's, but it does require the volunteer to, you know, obviously learn the language, you know, get to know the community, be involved in the community, talk with the community. And in Senegal, it's the way that you are introduced to a community. First of all, Aaron mentioned the name Cheikh earlier. Cheikh was our farmer, so he was our farmer partner. So just like in the US, if you wanted to go work in small town USA and you walked into a town and you walked up to Farmer John would be like, who's this city slicker trying to come into my town, talk to me and tell me about ag practices? He or she wouldn't want to talk to you. Same there, right? So you have a farmer partner that works with you. 1, 2, he or she introduces you to, and it's usually a he, to be honest with you, the town chief, the town imam, which is the religious leader. And then you have other people in the community, informal leaders. And so you spend that first few months, you know, getting to know your family, getting to know the community, talking to them about what, you know, the first project or so will be. And then you kind of go from there.
Do people like reach out to Peace Corps and be like, hey, we like want to work on this thing, but we're not really sure what to do? Do you have anybody who is volunteering who may be able to like help us?
Wish.
Yeah. No.
Literally, when I was in country, I was like, I don't understand why they don't set this up more. Go ahead, Brittany.
I agree. It's like there's so much you want to just like, oh my God. But you know, we had a Google Drive, which I know we're supposed not to have a Google Drive. But we, you know, whatever. But like it was like, yeah, why aren't we sharing this information? Like, hey, you did this over there. I want to do something like this. This is like dumb that we don't talk about this. But like in Costa Rica, we have different regions and we're not going to all get together. I mean, I never met half the people in the country, you know, like different vibes, different sectors, different everything. So who knows what they're doing? Granted, when you're a community and economic development volunteer, you're going to know those people. But even then, they're like 10-hour drive away and you don't know them that well. And like, how do you get that information? And then, of course, like Wi-Fi comes to my town a year after I leave. Like, how lovely. But
that's something I didn't even consider, is that maybe the infrastructure isn't there for you guys to communicate in a way like en masse like that.
Oh yeah, and then I was on the border of Panama and Costa Rica, so like my phone would just be like, "Welcome to Panama," and I'm like, no, and I don't want to pay, so I'd be like, just throw the phone away. I just better not. But I'd have to go, yeah, like an hour and a half to the nearest like bakery to go get some Wi-Fi, download some Netflix.
You say Wi-Fi too? Yes.
Oh yeah, Wi-Fi goes strong, man. Wi-Fi strong. I don't even remember what the main question we were
I don't even remember. My question.
It was about connections.
Do
they set you up with, you know, organizations or connections?
I think I'm sorry, Latrice had sort of answered it. I maybe said it in a way that was I was maybe being a little bit not verbose. I don't know, a little.
No, but I mean, I think you did make a good point, because even though they set you up with partners in the community, so families in the community, partners with the community, you know, they can introduce you to the village chief, the imam, the religious leader. there are organizations, NGOs, other organizations working in and around those communities, and the Peace Corps staff. So Peace Corps staff is made up of Americans and in-country personnel, right? So the in-country personnel in Senegal were, so your language instructors were all Senegalese. Our directors of agriculture, agroforestry, health, and business were Senegalese. They know everybody, right? They know all the NGOs, all of the government organizations. So I don't know why they don't introduce the volunteer to all the organizations working in that community so that it automatically gives you connections, right? And then, you know, Brittany, as a business volunteer, she knows how business development, but as an ag volunteer, they don't teach us business development. They just teach me how to plant, sustainable, and take care of the soil and all that stuff. So
I will say, I do know a little bit of the theory of why they don't introduce us directly right away. I do think it's weird that they don't eventually introduce us to like whoever the closest like NGO volunteer is, or like maybe the closest government liaison, because in Senegal, for instance, when it comes to education, each educational region has kind of like a liaison to the government, and they're not always in that specific region, but they come visit and they check like all the schools and check in, and so like that's a good resource to have. But it turns out, I was asking somebody about this. So whenever I go back to when I said when I was 14, I wanted to volunteer. From the time I was 14 until I volunteered, I interviewed over 30 Peace Corps volunteers because I really wanted to understand what I was walking into.
Erin is the most prepared person I've ever met in my entire life.
Yeah.
She was like, do you mind? Look, Nick, do you have like some questions that I can pass to them? And I was like, I don't really do it like that. Like I just kind of go off the cuff. And she was like, is it okay if I make up some questions to just send to them? And you don't even need to ask them, but just so we can be prepared. And I was like, yeah, that's fine, I guess. She's just like the most prepared person of all time.
I wanted to help everybody feel,
No, I love it.
Good.
I love it.
Yeah.
I told you like 6 times you're the best guest I've ever had in my life.
But okay, so one of the people I talked to though was like one of the first volunteers in their country in the early 70s. And I wish I could remember what country it was. But at the time, they were working off of a theory of maybe we shouldn't send people into their communities one at a time. Maybe we should send them in as like a partnership, like send them in with somebody else that's also a PCV. And if they didn't have somebody to send them in with, then they did try to partner them with somebody in country. Turns out that's not really a great idea for production work. What they found would happen if it was like 2 volunteers of like about the same age, they would rely on each other too much and their language struggled to develop well. And you have to remember, again, this is back before internet. Like if you're keeping up with your family, you're writing snail mail back home. They're writing snail mail to you. Like you can imagine how long that's taking depending on which country you're in and how far into that country you are. And the same thing then was happening if they partnered up with somebody who was like an NGO who was not originally from that country. So like say an American's in the Philippines and they have somebody who's like from France and an NGO with them, they also started to rely on each other too much and instead of relying on their communities. And they realized they're like, we want you to know who's around you as a resource, but we don't want you to know too soon. And it's also one of the reasons why they try to keep volunteers like more than a 30-minute walk from each other, because they will just gravitate towards each other, which is understandable, right? Like it is a very emotional experience. And it will, I did not get to complete my service. And I still feel lots of sorts of ways about a lot of different things. And I wasn't even there for my full years of service, right? It is super emotional. There's nights where my wool off was done at 2 p.m. And in Senegal, you're up until 11. The way in which society works is you don't really go to bed until 11 because you like rest after lunch or whatever because it's the hottest part of the day. And so you stay up later. I remember one night I was like, I'm done. And I was done at like 7:30. I just couldn't be around anybody else anymore. My Wolof was long gone. My brain was not cooperating. I was trying to speak German. I was like, I haven't spoken German since I was 16. Like, what the freak, you know? Like, that was just blowing my mind. I like walked into my room, face planted on my bed, and bawled until I fell asleep because it was just so overwhelming. So you can see how volunteers or NGOs or whoever will gravitate towards each other because they're all experiencing some really high emotions. They're feeling like, oh, I need a little extra support. I don't know if I can do this on my own. I need this extra support. You don't. Like, that's a really hard pill to swallow, but the pill is you don't. You are this amazing individual. You are much smarter than you give yourself credit for. And yes, are you going to face plant in the dirt on a regular basis? Hell yes, you are. And it's going to be really freaking embarrassing half the time. But you know what? You're going to learn so much more from your failures than from your successes. And you will then become a much more successful volunteer at the end of the day. But if you don't go through the stumbling and the tripping and the face planning, you never become that ultimate successful volunteer. Like, you have to go through that process. And when you have a volunteer too close to you, you don't go through that process. You have a crutch. So they did try to do that back in the day, helping people kind of partner up, have a little bit of more stability, feel like a little bit more like familiarity. It doesn't help with the long-term success.
I know.
And they do, you know, clusters. So you're somewhat close to some people-ish, you know, at least like if you're going through it rough, you've got someone that's gonna speak English to you real
That's a good
fast.
point.
As soon as you had mentioned the partners, that actually made me realize why, because that's actually why Mormons always are missionaries, and they're two missionaries, so that you always have someone else to lean on, and like to be with and connect with. And
well, that comes from the New Testament. Jesus sent them out in twos. So like, no offense to, okay, that's a whole different discussion, but it's like, you know, okay, New Testament or Old Testament, New Testament, and then whatever's going on with the Mormons. But like in the very first book of the New Testament, we talk about in Christianity that they were sent out in twos. So.
And that's always a common question. Peace Corps volunteers. Are you a Mormon? That's like first up. First
in other countries, is it like, oh God, here comes the Peace Corps people to come and knock on our door and try and talk to us about America?
No, but there's a conspiracy theory that Peace Corps volunteers are spies. And I was talking to someone because I was dangerous. Like talking about, but so here is the example that they gave me. They said, what if someone from China or someone from Russia came to the hills of the Appalachian Mountains, you know, learned, you know, the local dialect, started dressing like the folks in the Appalachian Mountains, came out of the mountains, and you were like, who the heck is this person? Talks like them, dresses like them, you know, is taking notes, right? Sending notes back to the US government. Wouldn't you think that was a spy?
Yeah.
But we're not. I mean, Peace Corps volunteers are not spies. And Peace Corps volunteers generally are have a bachelor's or higher. We did have someone in Aaron Stage, I think, that had an associate's degree, but they're generally have a bachelor's or higher. So educated Americans going to these foreign countries, you know, in these communities, learning languages, you know, with family, and sending notes back to the U.S. government. So,
yeah, no, that's definitely all the hallmarks of a spy. That's I can see why
you don't want me to spy. I'm the most nervous person on the face of the earth.
I'm the worst at keeping a secret. I'm like, I hear a secret and I'm immediately like, I gotta tell everybody the secret. Sorry. Like if I have a secret that I need to keep for myself, when I asked my wife to marry me, I bought the ring and I waited 6 hours. But it was
I was saying, burn a hole in your
pocket. It was eating me alive. Eating me alive. I can't lie and I can't tell a secret. I can't keep a secret. So don't tell me anything you don't want me to.
That's good for your wife, I guess. That rocks. She can read you through.
6 hours, and it almost killed me holding it in that long.
That's hilarious. Also, though, I mean, to go back to like help disprove why that theory is wrong is that the military will never come in and rescue a Peace Corps volunteer. And I think the last time the military ever directly helped the Peace Corps was it was like somewhere near Kosovo in the 70s or something. Like the military had a plane in country and they were like trying to just load up like every American and get them out of there because like things went to like crap overnight. So like the Peace Corps like loaded up with everybody else, but they were like, look, they sent the military for you. Like you're important. And we're like, no, we're not important. Like they don't care about us.
Is
like
the Peace Corps funded through the military budget?
Do
Is
what?
the Peace Corps funded through the military budget?
Oh no.
It's direct.
Got its own one.
Oh,
They
it's
just
direct
keep
funding.
chipping away at it.
Yeah, DoD funding it only Department of Defense funding only funds Department of Defense. You know, I mean, when we went to, you know, Iraq and Afghanistan and, you know, the State Department, obviously people who worked for the State Department, you know, they didn't join the State Department to go into a war zone to teach, you know, community building. And so, you know, it was obviously the obvious answer was to partner with the U.S. Department of Defense to do that. And so I don't know what the funding looked like, but that's an example of how I would think that they might have been supporting the State Department with funding, you know, with their $700 billion budget. But yeah, Peace Corps has its own budget.
With the
minuscule budget.
I'm sure it's very small compared to the DoD budget.
Speaking of budgets, we should talk about how much Peace Corps volunteers make when we're in country.
I think if I remember from what didn't Aaron have to pay to go? Aaron, did you have to pay money to do this?
Sort of. I do warn people. I feel like you have to be you have to have a little bit of money to get into the Peace Corps. People are like, you can do it with no money. And I'm like, I'm sure you can, but it is really hard. And I don't know somebody can help me say this in like a, you know, better way, but it's like, you can't be poor and get into the Peace Corps. It takes a lot of financial effort. And what I mean by that is, I think I spent over $2,000 alone on medical.
So, okay, let's bring this up because I just went, it is Peace Corps week, right? So I'm utilizing my time with school to go to these Peace Corps webinars. And I just learned, which I didn't fucking know this because I agree. Like that's the biggest thing. It's like, oh, it's free to get there, right? Whatever. I mean, yes, as long as you don't have any debt too, that really will eat you. But
run a credit check?
They said, yeah, not really. Well, okay, hold on. But they said that they reimburse all of those medical things for getting in. Is that true or false?
It's true to an extent. So like, Latrice, what was that shot we had to take that was like on the yellow card? There's like a $200 shot, and then there's like all these other shots you had to get. The problem for me was, remember how I said it took me almost a full year to clear medical? I had like, when you apply for Peace Corps, you only have to give 4 years of your medical history. However, I had like a note at like the very last year on the medical history that was like referencing something from like whenever I was in, I don't know, 10th grade. And I had to go find all of that information. And guess what? That doctor had passed away. His like doctor's office didn't exist anymore. So they were like, you have to go and find a specialist for this item and get them to like get us all the paperwork to clear you. I went to that specialist. First of all, I had to find a specialist. I had to like go to my regular doctor, pay to see that doctor, get an appointment with the specialist, wait, get in to see the specialist, fill out the paperwork. Then I had to go through like lab work and imaging and all sorts of other stuff. It was like a whole thing. And that took alone like 5 months. Got all of that paperwork sent to them. And then they kept asking the same question back. And finally I called the Peace Corps nurse that's in DC. And I was like, what are you looking for? Because I've gone back to this doctor 6 times now with the same question. he's great. He fills out more information, but like clearly it's not what y'all are looking for. It drove me absolutely crazy. Also, that specialist was not near me in Austin. I had to like travel an hour to the very north side of Austin to get to them. So I took time off of work, but like thankfully I worked in this space where I was able to take sick leave or whatever. But I was also trying to do this on the down low. So people are like, man, like for a while, my boss thought I was sick because I went to so many doctor's appointments. My boss pulled me aside at one point and was like, do you have the big C? Do we need to get you FMLA paperwork? Like he was worried. And I was like,
no, I'm quitting.
yeah, I'm trying to quit in a year. But like, I couldn't say that, right? I couldn't say that. And I was just like, oh, no, we're just getting everything, situated. We're cool.
Well,
No.
those financial requirements, you had talked a little bit about the education requirements. Does that, and like it also sounds like it's difficult to get in. Does that sort of make it difficult for, like obviously low income people have a hard time joining, and also like does that create like so the mass majority of finances in America is consolidated with white people, right? Does that make it more difficult for people of color to join the Peace Corps? Or like, is the demographics of the Peace Corps similar to that of the United States?
No, I think that, I was just trying to look up the percentage of the ethnic background of Peace Corps volunteers. I don't exactly see it, but what you will see is that, the majority of U.S. Peace Corps volunteers are white or Caucasian. And I think that when you think about, even if a minority goes to university, that minority needs to graduate and get a job that pays well. So when we were Peace Corps volunteers, I made about $400 a month. The Peace Corps volunteer or Peace Corps will stop your, if you have loans, they'll stop your student loans while you're a Peace Corps volunteer. You have to apply for it. But, if you are someone who has to, needs, money, a salary, then the U.S. Peace Corps, makes it kind of prohibitive for you to join. And so when you think about, and the reason why I shook my head when Aaron asked me about the medical is because I'm military, I just go on, an installation and get my shot. So I don't know how much they are. But, when you talk about the medical, when you talk about, the clothing requirements or things that you need to take with you, in country, it can be, cost prohibitive for folks. And so what you'll see now is the Peace Corps has started I knew they were doing a tourney to HBCUs, so historically Black universities and colleges, to increase recruitment of minorities in the U.S. Peace Corps. Which reminds me of the fact that sometimes when we're in a country, and I think when volunteers are deep in the countryside, a lot of people don't realize that there is as much of an ethnic diversity in the U.S. as there is, and so they think that if they want a white volunteer, and if they don't get a white volunteer, then they want to send that volunteer. They want to send them back, and they want a white volunteer to come to their village because it's prestigious for them. And so, we need volunteers of all ethnicities, in the Peace Corps service so that, people of the world can see that, no, Americans come in all shapes and sizes and colors.
I would imagine when you're in other countries, you're also dealing with other prejudices and other like cultural sort of stigmas surrounding other skin colors and also other lifestyles like the LGBTQ communities and stuff like that. Do those things ever affect like where you can serve, or how are those things kind of handled?
Couple of stories, I think, from Peace Corps. So I actually have 3 stories. I'll try.
Also, I'm sorry if this is like the most awkward way to bring this up.
No, I think it's. Honestly,
my dog was snoring, so that's why I whipped my head around. I'm sorry, my dog was just like weird. Bad timing. I'm so sorry. Let me handle something. Keep going.
Oh, you can't hear him though. But anyway, so one Peace Corps, depending on the country you're serving in, the Peace Corps will probably tell the volunteer, you need to. So for Senegal, for example, volunteers are told that they need to hide, if they're LGBTQA. Did I miss something? And so volunteer. And I don't, for me, and I've said this to volunteers because I have a hard time, not being who I am. And, we just heard Brittany say she just is who she is, right? And so I can't imagine having to hide who I am. And volunteers, when they're in Senegal, they have to specifically hide who they are. And so they tell them that, I'm assuming, before they get to country and after they get the country. So you'll have volunteers who say, they're married, because with men they will want to marry you off, right? So it's easier just to put a ring on it and say I'm married, so they'll leave you alone, right? Or I'm single. So one story is, when volunteers are on the in the training area, they're free to be who they are, right? And some volunteers are flaming. You can just tell, right? Everybody knows the volunteer is not, is out. If there are volunteers who are not out, I think that I feel like, and I absolutely don't know who they were when we were in Peace Corps, there must have been a respect because there was no conversations about that. But if a volunteer was out, everybody knew it, right? So my last year in service, Peace Corps Senegal had it was a diversity and inclusion summit of some sort, right? So they had a Peace Corps volunteer who was clearly, LGBTQ, go in and talk to them. Do you know the Senegalese staff came out and said, we had no idea, right? And so then, one of my friends said, she was pointing people out, this person. And it was staff, it was volunteers who were out, who didn't care, who would share their story, this person is. They had no idea because they're not used to seeing it. So they don't know how to spot it, right? They don't. And because they worked on Peace Corps staff, when a Senegalese works or an in-country person works for the American government, they have to kind of follow the rules of the American government, right? So you have to accept LGBTQA. I mean, you have to, no sexual harassment, nothing informal on, work computers, things of that nature or whatever. So, I mean, but they had no idea. So the other story is this person wasn't a Peace Corps volunteer. They were some French intern student that was working in Senegal, deep in the countryside, got careless. Community found out that the guy was LGBTQ. They had to move him. They moved him to a village up near the capital. He was actually living in my friend's house, and her mother was like, psst, psst. Her mother knew what he was, but they had to move him, because the community, his life was in danger.
That's like, I feel like it's really only in like the last 40 or 50 years probably that gay people have been able to be out in themselves in America. Probably not even that long. And so to sort of go back in time for a lot of people like that must be extremely hard to do. And there's still people in our country who live who have to be in the closet and who get married to whether or not they want to, or who probably, it just must be like you were saying. I can't imagine trying to hide myself. I spend so much of my time and my life being super public online with exactly who I am and never hiding anything. I can't imagine what that must be like to try and hide that part of you. It's just fucking must suck.
Well, and then you're trying to just spread some fucking peace.
Right, yeah. No, that's the other thing. It's like,
come on, man. I'm trying to be real with you to help you out, and you're just being a dick. Yeah, people could go their whole service without them knowing. It's like, you guys are insane. But then once they know, it's like, what changes in your mind? Like, what difference am I from what you knew now to what you know? Like, come on, the education is right there. Like, let's move past this, people. Get over it.
I mean, I think I would like to think that, we're moving in the right direction. I don't know if we are in all parts of the world. I know obviously in some parts of the world we haven't been, but I would think that just like the, things like the Peace Corps going to other parts of the world and people seeing different lives, like those kinds of exposures probably are moving things in the direction, you know what I mean? Because I'm sure that, a lot of the people in those, I would think that in the community you were talking about where someone had to be moved, I would think that, there were maybe, even if there was 100 people in the village and, even if only 2 of them were like, well, fucking, whatever his name was, it really kind of must break that in your mind, I would think, even if it's on a small scale and you talk about that micro versus macro, like even if you just change 1 or 2 minds, like that's 1 or 2 minds that are changed forever.
I think you have to remember though that like, or maybe it's not remembering, maybe it's just like switching the perspective a little bit. Again, it's not our job as a volunteer to go in and change anybody or change our community. It is our job to be the resource that they need us to be. And in the process of being that resource, we get to be an example to them of all sorts of things. For instance, it was baffling to them that I was at the time 36 and unmarried without kids. And it was like, how, why, all of this stuff. And you have to think, I am in Senegal. I'm in a community, and it's a 95% Muslim country. They have what would be considered conservative values when it comes to how they picture their family, which is typically like a mom and dad and kids, and like there's aunts and uncles who are also married and like have kids, and like you grow up around your cousins, and it's not uncommon to like walk into like the family courtyard and see 20 cousins around. That's not an uncommon thought or a common scenario. But a lot of times it was really interesting because the women would sometimes, while we were like all of us women, if we were getting around and like washing our clothes together, the women would be picking on me like, you need a husband, you need a husband. I was like, Sohla Wuna Jekker, like I don't need a man, like I don't need a husband. And so like they would pick on me and tell me I did. But like when their 7-year-old daughter walked by, there would be the comment, be like her. That's like once I figured out that that's what that phrase meant, that they were saying, that this woman was saying to her daughter, like, pay attention to her, be like her. I realized what she was saying was, it's okay to be this independent woman. Would she have ever said that to her at that age without me sitting right next to her washing clothes? I don't know. Maybe she would have. Maybe there would have been another woman, example, an auntie or somebody, and she would have been like, it's okay. You don't have to get married young. You don't have to have children right away. You can still have all of those things, but like go and live your life how you think is best for you. So that was like, that's a big deal. And like, that's not LGBTQ, but that's a woman-centric issue. And a lot of women don't continue past like, as women get older in the community, you'll see less and less women in school. So like in 4th grade, it's pretty even, 50-50. You look at like the 10th grade class, a little bit more men than the women. And certainly by graduation, the percentage is even more drastic. So even in just that little way, a volunteer can make a big difference. And like whenever male volunteers would come to my community and visit with me and like work on any project, they were really, really sure to point out like if somebody who was a woman was speaking and she got somebody like cut in on her speaking, the male volunteer who had better language skills than me would cut that person off and say, she was speaking. Like, hold on, she was speaking. And they would take that moment to be like, I am a man. I see that you're a man who wants to speak, but like, let's let her say what she has to say. Her words are valuable. And those little seeds, those little moments, they freaking add up. They add up all the time. They add up. And so if you can just like maybe refocus just a little bit and say like, I'm not going to go into a community and make everybody love LGBTQ, like the alphabet mafia, right? Like, I can't do that. I can't change everybody's mind. But what I can do is plant these seeds along the way, and hopefully those seeds grow into really beautiful things somewhere down the road. And I'll never see it, and that's completely okay. It's just for me to plant those seeds, whatever they are. So that's my thought on that.
What was like the biggest culture shock thing for you, or like what was like the biggest thing that like you didn't expect, and then when it came around you like maybe didn't even know how to act? Or were there any big moments where you were like what the fuck was I thinking,
The whole first year. I am not kidding. So if you can imagine, I am an introvert. I know it's hard to tell, but so I gather my energy from being at home, right? Being alone. I always say it was a caca, and I'm probably going to say this word wrong while I am on a podcast, but cacophony.
Sounds right to me. Oh, a cacophony?
You guys know what word I'm using?
Oh, cacophony.
Yeah.
A cacophony. A cacophony is usually a bunch of noise, right? So my whole first year, it felt like all of these things were just coming at me, and I couldn't get far enough into my own space in order to rejuvenate, right? So if you can imagine, it was the heat, it was the mosquitoes, it was the flies, it was the critters. I was learning a language. I was living with a family. I was learning a new job. We were, we didn't have cars. And I hitchhiked a lot. We were alone in our own village.
Wait, you hitchhiked?
So there was all of these
Is that
things.
normal?
Yeah.
Is that normal to hitchhike?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not like in America.
Yeah, it is.
Very culturally
I have a
appropriate.
hitchhiking story as well. But anyway, so all of these things are coming at me. And I really honestly think that communities like countries that are communal, like Senegal, should probably ask or even maybe have a test for volunteers to see just how introverted they are. Because when you need to learn a language and when you need to get to know the community, and you're someone like me who's like, I just want to be in my room. I just need to be alone. I just need to just to get enough space to breathe. It took me a year in order to come up for air. Which honestly, when I was in the military, it was not, obviously I think ton of things coming at me, but it usually takes me a year. I moved to a new location. It takes me a year to kind of get myself together before. But literally when I was in Senegal, I remember one of my cousins saying that the first year she felt like I was gonna come home, but because I was in the military, I was never gonna come home, no matter how much I was struggling with everything. I wasn't gonna come home. Like Aaron said, it's emotional. I mean, it's a lot going on. It's just, and volunteers, when you decide, or if someone is going to thinking about joining the Peace Corps, I think you should do what Aaron did. I think you should talk to people. You need to assess who you are, because it's a very big decision. And I think Brittany said earlier, I mean, there are Peace Corps volunteers that get there and then they get sent home and they've sold their house, they sold their car. Volunteers were distraught. Volunteers were so distraught with COVID, right? They literally, when you think about it, volunteers had just arrived in country in September of 2019, and they got sent home in March of 2020. Sold your house, sold your car, got rid of your job, got rid of all of your stuff, and you come back to the US to nothing.
There was a Costa Rican cohort that came in and they never left the hotel, you guys. They never got out to Costa Rica. They got from staging to the hotel back to the US.
Sold your house, sold your car. Crazy.
And then your whole life shut down. COVID just shut. Which, that was a whole...
They were distraught. Yeah, Peace Corps volunteers were...
Is it just like fear? Is it just like what causes that to happen? Is it like just not knowing what's going to happen? Is it just the stress?
Like
Is it
you spent so you spent really long time, and I want to. Most people spend probably 3/4 of a year going through the process of getting in. So like, say you've done all your research, you did like a year's worth of research your junior year of undergrad, and you go, okay, at the beginning of senior year I'm going to apply. You graduate, which is what a lot of people do. This is not everybody, it wasn't me, but this is what a lot of people do. Their junior year, they do all their research. Senior year, they apply, go through the application process, and maybe like a month after they graduate, they're packing up their like 2 backpacks and they're going to like whichever country they're going to. They've done a lot of preparation work and a lot of hard work in general of just like talking to your family, getting rid of all of your belongings, or finding a storage unit if you have enough money to pay for a storage unit the whole time you're gone, which is crazy. Don't do that. But like some people do. Some people do. And you know what? If you have the money and that's what you want to spend your money on, then like do you, boo boo. But like highly don't recommend that. So you do all that work, you get to country, and I remember the very first day, like we land and we're immediately given, what was that pill we had to take every day, Latrice, for malaria? Yeah, our anti-malaria pill. I remember we have to take it every day. Well, it's like 10% of the people who take it can have like a bad reaction to it. So there's like a second pill you could take instead, like a backup pill. There was a guy who like had a bad reaction to the backup pill. He was gone in less than 48 hours after returning to country. And he was like a little panicked. And then we heard from him somehow whenever he got back home. He's like, oh yeah, my uncle offered me a job and I'm allowed to stay out at like the ranch house. Well, he had a pretty decently wealthy family that was set up. I mean, I don't think they were super rich, but like he had a place to go to. He had a job that he could walk right into. Nobody else would have had that, right? Like that's a pretty exceptional situation to be able to achieve that. So you do a year, 2 years or more worth of preparation and work to get there. And then just be sent right back. I can't even begin to process.
A lot of people don't have, when they come home, they don't have, like I wouldn't have had anyone to stay with. So I mean, and I have my military retirement. So Aaron, yes, I did pay $200 a month to store my furniture for 3 years because it cost a lot less for me to store my furniture than to buy everything new. But I understand that people cannot afford it, right?
Yes.
If people come home from the Peace Corps, a lot of people don't have anyone to stay with. They need a job when they get home, and it's scary. No job, no house, no car. It's scary.
And also, it's amazing how many Peace Corps volunteers are like, I don't want to say it like this, but like kind of like orphans. Like they're like, I don't have parents to go home to. I don't have siblings. I don't have a close relationship with any other family member. And I thought that would be like 1 or 2 people out of my stage. No, there was a solid like 10 people who were flipping out, and they all ended up getting like an Airbnb together and like living in an Airbnb together for like 3 months when they got back because they had nowhere else to go. That's a significant number of people when you think about it. Out of like my stage was 75 people, 10 of those people did not have a home, a room, nothing to go, not a car, not a nothing to go home to.
Well, and then, this whole COVID thing, and it's like one of the benefits of Peace Corps is having this non-competitive eligibility to get all these government jobs. Well, not when 7,000 of them are going at it at the same time because you were all kicked out at the same time. Like, I mean, no one knew where to go. I mean, I had extended another year and that got cut from me. Things that you're planning to do and then taken away. So not only are you like, didn't have a place to go back to anyways, it was like, hey, you have 3 days to figure that out. Oh, and you have to self-isolate because there's this crazy thing happening that we don't know anything about. But we're just going to give you a pair of gloves and a mask and send you your merry way. And we'll offer you some health insurance that you're going to have to pay, like $200 a month. But it's okay. It's just, Peace Corps. It's like, what the actual fuck?
Well, that was when I mean, like, I remember when Aaron came home, and that was like right at the beginning. Like that was back when we thought there was like a 2% mortality rate for, and that it was going to be like millions of people dead and dying. Well, I mean, you know, like all at once, like right in the beginning, we thought like within the first year there was supposed to be like a 2% mortality rate in the U.S., which would have been like, but like we didn't know. So you guys are fucking coming. So like you're leaving your what's essentially your must be your home at that point, and you're just getting dropped back here with nothing. That must be terrifying.
Yeah, and then like, I mean, so Costa Rica, how it went was like, hey, there's this thing happening. You guys have a week, and you know, get your affairs in order. Then the next day, it was like, hey, actually, the borders are closing. You need to come today. And I was like, okay.
Fuck.
And I live 10 hours from the capital. So I had 2 hours to pack 2 bags of 2 years of my life and then just leave. And like, thankfully, we had a car so I could drive to the bus station to catch the 3 o'clock afternoon bus to then get to the capital. And then whoever you arrived to the hotel with was your roommate. I mean, it was just like you had to get to this hotel with what you had, and you had to cash out your bank account. I mean, you were going to medical. It was just like chaos, tears, shock. And like, what is happening? I mean, no one knew anything. And then the more you just like went through the motion, you're like, okay, like I don't even understand what's going on. And then they started being like, okay, you guys are assigned on flights. And then we had buses leaving every 2 hours to the airport. And it was like, you're just getting called and no one's going to bed because you're waiting for your friend to leave. And it was just like, what is going? And then, yeah, you get to the airports. And it was like, now thinking about it, like no one's in a mask. Like they gave us gloves and a mask. I'm like, who was gonna wear gloves at the airport? But like we didn't know anything. I just felt like I was wearing like maxi pads on everything. And it was just like seriously, it was ridiculous. But I mean, it was just so chaotic because there was so lack of information. And then the Peace Corps it was just like, poof, it's gone. It doesn't exist.
Was there anyone who just decided to stay? Or can you just decide to stay? Like at the end of your thing, can you just be like, fuck it, I'm not going?
We actually had a friend find out she was pregnant a week before we were evacuated. And so she ended up changing her home of record to stay down in Costa Rica. And then, yeah, well, Peace Corps pays for the pregnancy.
Sick.
Super sick. And so she's actually still vibing down there. Her parents moved down there. She's a little older, so it like kind of worked out for her lifestyle. But that was like the only case that we had that people kept threatening, but it was like, when would you go home? I mean, they were shutting borders, that it was like a serious situation. Because like Costa Rica was pretty chill, but like our friend Kiana in Kosovo, they were sending in the embassy to go pick them up on airplanes and then go to Albania to pick up them. I mean, people were kind of carpooling embassies to get out. I mean, it was nuts.
When you're in the country for that long, does it feel like that's your home? And that like you're leaving your home to come back to like a strange place?
I felt that. I was very connected. I truly, and I was, doing the extension. And I still want to be like, hey, if I had money, I'd buy your coffee farm and I'd live with you forever. And that's still in the books. Because yeah, but I mean, it was more of like they kind of teach you reverse culture shock in a bit. They talk about coming back, but no one knew what even a pandemic was. So to come back to just another layer of society, we can go back to being with your normal friends, which that's a whole, new thing then, because you've experienced this massive life thing. And then to come back to your friends, and then you're told you can't even see your friends. I mean, it was rough. Not gonna lie.
I would imagine.
So talk about reverse culture shock. I wasn't there long enough to really have it, but what you see here is a bottle of egg shampoo and then a bottle of conditioner. They're empty. I bought these at like my local little forget what it's called, help me out.
Boutique.
Thank you. Bought it, the boutique. That's the 2 items I would use, and I would wash my hair upside down in a bucket, and every once in a while I would slip and fall into my bucket, so water would go up my nose. And I remember when I got back, I had to carry water. Like, we didn't have enough water in our community at one point. We had it shipped in, and I'd have to carry it in bidons. My little sister could carry 2, and I could barely carry 2. It was embarrassing. And also kind of sad at the same time that like my 8-year-old sister could like carry.
On your head?
Yeah, she would do one on her head, and then she would do one like holding it, like farmer's carry. And I'd like try to farmer's carry both of them, and I'd be like, I'd make it like 20 yards and have to sit it down, and then I'd pick it up and do it again, all the way back to the house. And I was so pathetic. Anyways, I got back, and I remember I was at a friend's place, and he was gracious enough to like, he was like, well, if you're sick, we're gonna get sick together, like come on, because I couldn't go to my parents' house. My dad had cancer previously, and he didn't have any immune system built back up. I remember I walked in and turned on the shower, and I didn't even think about it. I just turned it on. I had to think about how to turn it on. That was weird. But I turned it on, and I didn't turn it on to hot water. And then it clicked in my head. I was like, you not only have clean water available to you, you have clean running water available to you. And if you want to, you could push this knob a little bit further and it's gonna be hot. And so like I purposefully kept these because like when I got back to the States, this was like the only shampoo and conditioner I had left, and they were like halfway full each. And I didn't have time to go to the store. So like I just continued to use it when I got back. And then I kept the bottles. And I know this is gonna sound really weird, and I'm sure there's people out here who will hear this and think it's bizarre. But every time I step into the shower, I see this, and I thank God for clean water, clean running water, clean hot running water. And then like even though like I'm not like a super duper crazy Christian, like I don't go to church every Sunday, like I pray for my community. And I feel a lot of guilt about the things that I didn't get to complete. I feel guilt over like not having the language anymore to speak to my host family or my partner farmer, and I want to know what's going on in their lives. And unless they send me messages in French that I can like hit the auto translate on, I don't have a very good understanding. So it's like a perfect reminder to me of like, it just represents a lot. And I think other people probably went through that too, but on a much bigger scale because they were there for way longer than I was. So
Yeah, I mean, you hear about volunteers, like Brittany said, talking about reverse culture shock. So if you can imagine, as an American, a lot of, and I haven't looked at the statistics of this, but, a lot of Americans, we grew up in, our own microcosm of whatever state you live in. A lot of people don't leave the state, and there's nothing wrong with that, but that's what right? So as a Peace Corps volunteer, you take your 2 bags, you pack up, and you go live in another country, another culture, language, for 2 or 3 years, and you come back to the U.S. And if you're as immersed in the culture as Brittany, even if you aren't as immersed, right, as she is, it's still, a culture shock because you come back and you're trying to talk to your friends, but now, the conversations might feel a little bit awkward. You want to talk about your experience, but people, they ask you about your experience, but they don't necessarily really want to hear. It's just too much, right? So they would teach us to have our 2 sentence elevator speech for when someone asks, because they don't really want to know, and you might have a lot that you want to download, and people they don't want you downloading your shit, literally, shit conversations, because Peace Corps volunteers can talk about bathroom conversations all day long and not be grossed out, and the average American is like, you are grossing me out. I don't want to hear about, X, Y, and Z, right? Or they don't want to hear about, creeping eruptions under, a volunteer's, I don't know if you know what creeping
I
eruption
don't, but
is,
I'm here for it.
critters under your skin, right? That, a volunteer, I don't know.
Like
if
bot
it looks
flies?
like worms under your skin. So when you walk in sand or whatever, you can get like, I don't know if it's a worm, I don't know what it is, under your skin, and it's called creeping eruption. I mean, they don't want to hear about, the fact that I was cold and it was 75. I was cold. I didn't want to take a shower. So I kept putting it off. And I wasn't, I would go to the field, but I wasn't getting dirty. So I'm like, I'm not taking a shower today. I'm going to take one tomorrow. I'm just gonna, and a few days later, I start getting these boils under my armpit, and I got one on my back, and I got rid of the boils under my armpits by applying onions on them, but the one on my back would not go away. I had to go to the doctor to have them cut it out, and it was all of this shit that was in pus and stuff in my back.
Wait, what does the onion do?
So much.
What's the onion do?
Draws the impurities out and toxins.
Really?
Onions are great for
You know
drawing
what?
out toxins.
And what's crazy is I was only 2 hours away from the doctor, but I didn't want to go schedule an appointment, go to the doctor. The hole was so big, they had to pack it with gauze by the time I went. I kept feeling it and touching it. And I used to work in the hospital. So I'm like, okay. And I'm actually really good about, you guys don't look at me like I'm crazy, but literally I did wait. I was trying
I haven't been to a doctor in like 4 years. You're good.
Yeah.
I mean, I go to the doctor, prior military. but literally, and can you imagine there's volunteers that were 2 days away from the doctor, right? And when I say 2 days, that's a bike ride out of their village, park the bike, get on and they might have to get in a car to the next larger village and then take a bus to wherever and then take another car. So 2 days away from the doctor or from training. So $400 a month, you're paying your rent, you're paying your electricity, you're buying your food that, you have to use that money to get 2 hours or 2 days back to. Yeah, so I just didn't want to.
Oh, they don't. So they pay you $400 a month.
What's the cause? Sorry. What was the cause of that? Like what? How? Why?
I don't know. I really don't know, honestly, but it happened after it was winter time. It was, so in Senegal, in the summertime, it's over 100 degrees, right? In May, June, July. I mean, it's actually gets up to 100 almost
Sounds
every
like
day.
a fucking nightmare.
But in the winter time, what happens is it drops down to 75. So, and it was cold. Houses are not insulated as well as they are here. And so I was like, okay, I walked to the field today, but I don't feel dirty. So I'm going to wait until tomorrow. And then the next day I'm like, I'm going to wait another day. And
Also, but remember how I said back
I can't believe you cured it with an onion.
You have like
I did
You were just
cure it with an
you
onion.
cured some of it with an onion. I just like picturing you being like, you know what, just fucking, it's fine. Just slap an onion on it. You know what I mean?
So
Grill up some mushrooms and
I
green
did that,
peppers,
like,
slap that
last
on there
week.
too. It's gonna be perfect.
I don't know who's watching this, but now I take 2 baths a day these days.
I'm not shy. You don't have to.
I was like, I am not trying. So literally that's all I know is that's when it started happening. And after that, I was like, okay, Latrice, I don't care how cold you are. You have got to get your butt in the shower and quickly, just splash, splash, splash.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's crazy.
I'd put my bucket out in the sun as soon as I left the house. I'd like put it out in the sun and hope that it would heat up enough by the time I came back.
But you were a village volunteer, so you guys didn't have, I mean, I was a city volunteer, so I had a shower in my house. And it was just cold. Well, here's the deal. I was a city volunteer. And when I first got to, when you first get to country, you're in training and you get one opportunity to go visit your family, your house with the volunteer that you're replacing, right? So I'm like, I'm a city volunteer. I'm going to have a bathroom. I'm so excited. I'm going to have a toilet. We get into the room. She's like, here's the room. Here's the bed. You'll be able to keep it. Here's the table, She opens the bathroom door and it is literally concrete with a hole in the ground. And I was like, where is the toilet? And she was like, and here's the thing, volunteers had to install that stuff themselves. So if you were a volunteer who just graduated from college, right, and you're getting $400, they give you, the Peace Corps will give you installation money if you're the first volunteer, so you can buy a few things, right? So the first volunteer had bought the bed. The second volunteer had bought the table and the stool and a mattress. And so when she opened the bathroom door, I was like, and mind you, retired military, retirement check. I want to buy a bathroom. And so immediately our mother, who's called a Yai, she's like, would you like to see my bathroom? And my, the person before me was like, I've never been in her room. And I was like, well, let's go. She had the most beautiful bathroom I had ever seen. I was like, I want one of those. Right? So literally I had a toilet installed. I had a sink installed. I mean, I was like,
whoever came after you is so fucking grateful to you. Whoever came after you.
Well, what happened is they moved the volunteer. They talked to me. And so the volunteer was moved from the city to the village, which is where Erin lived, which is the best thing because she lived in the community that we were working in.
That makes sense.
Yeah. But anyway.
That's crazy that it's wild to me that they pay you $400, but then you also have to pay all your own expenses.
You have to, you guys, how much was your rent a month? So it's different for city volunteers versus volunteers who live in the country, depending. Brittany, you're like.
So
I'm like, Brittany?
Well, I'm kind of shocked that you guys had like a cool little pay for what other, we didn't have a lot of replacements. I'll say that. I mean, I went to my site. The last volunteer was 20 years ago. So
okay.
I mean, I'm starting completely fresh. And then some people did take over, but there was usually no transition. And I guess they max out at 3 volunteers. So it's like, if you haven't gotten it by 3 volunteers, you're done for a while. But we got like $500 a month, and I paid about $250 for room and board. Just done. And I lived with my host family the whole time. I just gave them.
So they fed you.
They fed me. I do bake a lot, so I just did my thing. They loved it. But I'm gonna utilize. If I'm gonna freaking pay you for all my meals, I'm gonna really get going, right? But yeah. So I gave them a lot of money, but I feel like it was very well. It just made sense. And then I had my phone bill. I think was like $12 a month.
You had a phone bill?
Because I got a SIM card, but I got on a plan because it was cheaper to get on a plan. And it worked better. But the first of the month is when you've got the best Wi-Fi or cell, whatever, and then you use up your data, but it still gets you the rest of the month, but it's so much slower.
Okay, Brittany, don't hate the Senegalese volunteers, but Peace Corps Senegal had phone. They were the throwaway phones because the battery would last longer, and they had phone plans for all of the volunteers.
I thought this was going to go the other direction.
Here's why. Security. They wanted to make sure that they could get in touch with every single volunteer 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We had at any given time over 200 volunteers in country, and when we were crossed over in the rotation, it was over 300 volunteers in the country and across the country, and some volunteers 2 days away. So yeah, a lot of volunteers did use they would have their personal phone and their in-country phone. I did too, okay. But they paid for phone service.
Yeah, we did not get that.
It's honestly,
Um,
Brittany, and this is not taking away anything from you, but like I never even thought of Costa Rica as like a developing country. Like I feel like don't people vacation in Costa Rica?
yes, I was definitely. I mean, I was in an
And not to
interesting
take
part.
anything away from what you've done, not at all. That's not I don't.
No, no, no.
But
That's why we call it the posh core. That's what I'm saying. I mean, truthfully, I thought I was gonna be in a hut with like no electricity. Truthfully, I wanted the experience, but and then I'm like, oh yeah, like, can you hotspot my phone? You know, like whatever. So, I mean, it kind of depends. But granted, we did have a lot of indigenous people right on that border that it really is developing in some areas, you know, specifics.
Brittany, don't you think that, maybe the indigenous population is the reason why they might have invited us into, Costa Rica, or, I don't know.
I mean, I think that Costa Rica will take anything. You know, they don't have a military. They're very peaceful in like just who they are. So I think they like the aid of some sort of peace thing like that. But you know, if you're not on a resort, it's looking pretty bad. So as much as yes, you have these communities, but that's like purely tourism, you know, very strict. And then you go to the school and the school is ass.
is that similar in Senegal? Is there like parts of Senegal that are more that like would seem almost recognize like similar like lifestyle to what maybe I'm used to or like a typical American's used to, and then there's some parts that are not?
I would say, typically when the average American travels, we travel to, the capital city, we go to the beach areas. And in Senegal, the capital city, the beach areas, and then there is a city up north where they have a jazz fest. They're completely different than where how 95% of the country is living. And so the average tourist is not going to get the true experience, of how Senegalese see the country. And so it's a different experience.
Do the like the so like in Costa Rica and in Senegal, do the people who are um like the indigenous people or the like native people,
The locals.
the locals, yeah, do they look down on like those parts of those things, or do they see them as a positive, or is it not something they think about one way or the other?
In Costa Rica, there's a lot of, I mean, racism between just Costa Ricans and indigenous, and it depends on what end of the country you live on, whether you hate the Panamanians or the Nicaraguans. I mean, really, truly, because here's the
What's
thing:
the can I
coffee.
just ask you what's the just this is a complete naivete on my spot. Like, what is the difference between the indigenous and the Costa Ricans?
So, so there's like 5 or 6 tribes, I believe, and they're kind of scattered throughout Costa Rica, and they have self-governing. I mean, they've got their own religion, language, lifestyle, everything. And so it's interesting. So in my community, since it is on the border, the indigenous people lived on the Panamanian side and went to school on the Costa Rican, and my town had an elementary school. And so they'd walk over. But I mean, when they're starting kindergarten, they don't know Spanish. They know their Nobe Bugle language. And so just even getting over that hurdle to get into their own country, I mean, it's pretty, they immediately look down upon them because they don't know the language. And I mean, like, set you apart. And then usually their hygiene is very noticeable. And in Costa Rica, they're very obsessed with brushing their teeth. I mean, after you eat a meal, you brush your teeth. And I mean, at school, you get done with lunch, everyone goes to brush their teeth. And so the indigenous kids, they're not equipped with all of that information nor, anything. So they try and teach them, and then the parents, it's just like, you can see it, and then what you can see, you discriminate. So, but then when it comes to coffee season, Costa Rica's big coffee town. Well, they all travel. And that's what that's usually their main jobs that they like to take, is they'll come up from Panama and come down from Nicaragua, and they'll pick all the coffee. Well, coffee season's from like October to February, or September to February. And so, I mean, there's fights that break out, there's certain things, and then that's when, things get a little more, tension rises. But I don't know. It's very interesting because some really accept that indigenous culture in that specific region, but that's completely different than this indigenous culture in this specific region. I mean, it's just a shit. Like during one, my friend, actually, her site community, their religious leader was murdered. And it's like a big deal because it was like an indigenous guy, right?
Holy
it's like, well,
shit.
why? Yeah, what the actual fuck? There's a lot of things that happen in Peace Corps that just slide right under that radar of. Yeah,
well, you become a part of the community, so it must not be like, I guess that's kind of like a testament to how good you are at becoming a part of your community, right? If it's not like.
Literally. But you know what's okay, so complete sidebar. But like I went and got another nose piercing because I turned 30 last year, and I was like, why not another one? And the guy that did it in my home, Illinois, he was like, oh, Peace Corps people, like, cool. I knew someone that was in the Peace Corps, and they had someone in their cohort get murdered. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, tell me this story. And I guess so this person gets involved dating some guy in their community, and it's a tribe, and he's like a prince of a tribe. Anyways, they break up, he kills her. And it was like, classic Peace Corps. Then like their cohort gets evacuated because they're just dealing with this, and it's like, there's a lot of random things that you just wouldn't even think that happen that do.
You just reminded me of a super funny story, and it didn't happen while I was there, but there was obviously, Peace Corps love is a thing. So I don't know if this couple came to country as a couple or if they met while they were in country, but anyway, they were, if you can imagine, when you're in communities, there's not like a lot of private spaces to go like there might be in the US. You can go to Starbucks and have a coffee, you can go to the library and hang out, you can, go chill at the park. So this couple decided they were going to have a little hanky-panky on top of the well and fell in the well.
On the well? Jesus.
And the wells are deep. I don't know how they're deep.
You gotta bend certain ways.
The couple fell in the well. And you know what? I'm thinking one of my friends, I think she told me that she had met the couple recently. Like, I mean, literally they're around. So yeah, this couple falls in the well, and I can't even remember how long they were in the well, like who, obviously they probably were screaming, and the local community probably came, and I don't know how they fished them out, but I mean, to be that couple that is still being talked about, on podcasts, in 2023, when it probably happened a decade ago. Come on.
Yeah, that's good. You live forever, and on this podcast as the couple that fell in the well while you're trying to get some on the fucking. I feel like that seems so disrespectful. Like, I don't know a lot about fucking Senegalese culture, but it seems like having sex on the public well is like super disrespectful to everybody.
Nobody knows why they fell in the well.
Well, obviously they're about balance.
I mean, they probably they probably didn't tell the local community that they were, he
probably tried to bust a move. He probably saw something on the internet.
And a lot of the wells are not covered. Yeah,
tried to throw it out there, surprise her, and that was it. Fell in the well.
Yeah, fell in the well.
Happens to the best of us, overachievers. You gotta fucking stay right in the middle, guys. Don't try and do anything crazy. Is there anything? This is a question I came up with last night when I was sitting in bed and I was like looking around at all this stuff and I was like trying to think like if I was gonna go somewhere, like what would I bring with me? Was there anything you brought with you that you were like, this is gonna be so fucking useful, and then you got there and you were like, this is the fucking most useless piece of shit. Like I cannot believe I dragged this fucking thing 400, 4,000
3/4 of what I took.
Yeah.
Yes.
Miss, I had retirement checks, so I was like gonna buy, didn't look at what was on the checklist, right? Just looked at online to see what people said to bring. So I know this is a podcast. Oh my gosh, I don't know who's watching, but I'm gonna tell you. So what I didn't bring was toys. And so I tried to have the first year, right? So I tried to have my friend mail me some and they confiscated it, right? And so when I came home, I bought it and I hid it in all of my electronics, right? So it's hidden with all the wires and stuff. So got it in country. The one thing that I brought, and I'm going to close my camera right back so I can, that I loved, is, can you see me?
Yep.
This blanket. It's a t-shirt blanket. I had a million t-shirts and I don't wear t-shirts. So someone made it for me a million years ago. And I took it to country and of course it's dusty in Senegal. So I throw it on the line to get it washed. And my yai, who's my mother, had said, Latrice, make sure you watch your clothes, watch them when you wash and stuff. So I kept going down to check. I go down to check and it's missing. And I go upstairs and I'm hysterical because one of the t-shirts is from my grandmother's 100th birthday party. I mean, it's, I used to run races, military. I mean, it's just really special to me, right? So she's like, get your brother. So I go downstairs and so I lived in what they're called is a compound in Senegal. So we had a very large house. My mother and father and little sister. And in Senegalese families, the younger siblings, they stay in the room with the parents, right? So mother, father, little sister had a room. There was a lady and two children renting a room across from me. I had my room downstairs. We had, I think, someone who worked at a bank, a teacher, and we had a couple of families that lived in rooms, right? So we were not, and then my brothers, I had 3 brothers who, mind you, I had 20 siblings, but most of them were out of the house. My father was, it's a polygamous community, so he was divorced several times. So a lot of the kids were grown and out of the family. But we knock on the door and this lady's like, and my brother's like, do you have blah, 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 blah? And she's like, oh, this? I was like, OMG. Like literally she was just gonna take it.
Wait.
But so
take it to use?
Yeah. To use. Like literally.
And not even tell you about it?
I'll tell it. Community, a lot of Senegalese, like what's yours is mine, honestly. What's yours is mine.
I mean, that's nice. That's
so one thing I didn't bring and one thing that I brought.
Clean it when you're done.
Oh, yeah.
Don't fall in the well.
What about you guys?
Don't fall in the well while you're using it.
Exactly. Brittany, what about you or Aaron?
I mean, like you said, I took so much shit and I'm like, oh, I need like 10 razors. Like I didn't even need that in like the US. Like I barely shave. I don't give a shit. And then, all these things I'm like, oh yeah, I'll definitely need. Absolutely not. And then, it honestly just pissed me off how much shit. But then I just start giving it away as like gifts. I'm like, I got some spray, like take it. Here's some earrings. I just get it out of my space. Because then we're evacuated and I'm like trying to clean it up. And I'm like, I don't need any of this. Like, I don't want to wear these clothes ever again. These are disasters. But yeah, I did take a toy. And I will say I got great advice from someone that said the best time to use it is when it rains. And I was like, you know what, you're right. Like, the sound and everything. So let me tell you, those more afternoon like rainstorms, shit got wild. It was great. It was like, do I take a nap? Do I have fun? Like, where's the family at right now? I don't know.
Excellent.
Oh, but Peace Corps, you get lonely.
Peace
I mean,
Corps?
come on. You're not having, and you're not wanting to get out in the community. You're not. I mean, like, that's not the vibe I'm putting out there. I don't need that.
Well, I would imagine you want to
here
be
in-
careful with that. Anyways, like you were saying, like someone got murdered over like relation. Like people don't act in their right mind when they're fucking falling in love. You know what I'm saying? You don't want to fucking
Yeah,
come with
and-
that energy.
Yeah, and they're already just like, oh, be nice to the white girl. You know, she's American. So it's like already this like forced upon thing that it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, we're not going. I got myself, dog.
The Peace Corps love is a thing. Lots of volunteers.
big time.
There are volunteers who hook up with each other. There are volunteers who hook up with people in the community. I mean, I literally went to country saying I am not dating the whole time I'm here. And a friend and I had went to the Jazz Fest, right? And we are hanging out in this restaurant, and the waiter is talking to us, speaks does he speak good English? Good English, I believe. And so we tell him that I speak Wolof, she speaks Pular. He starts laughing, and we say we're farmers, and he's like, my friend's a farmer. And this chocolate drop walks over to the table, and I was like, damn. So then I date him for 3 months only. He was a great guy, but I'm an older volunteer, right? And he is an older guy. He was from a family of 9 kids. Most of the kids were educated, and he didn't want to go to university. And I mean, what am I going to do with a guy who doesn't want to go to university? You know, and it's a culture that is very conservative. So he wouldn't have wanted to cook. He wouldn't have wanted to clean. You know, at the time, I would have been the one having the kids. So he would have been another kid, right? I mean, I'm cooking, I'm cleaning, I'm teaching him, you know, the American culture, because we probably would have came back to the US so I could work. He wouldn't have been able to work. And even when he was able to work, like what kind of job would he have been able to get, you know, with the fact that I like to move around or whatever. So that did not last long.
No, I mean, from a practical standpoint, it must be difficult for like those kinds of relationships to last long term. I would think, unless like you.
But they do.
Oh, I'm sure.
Volunteers.
I just mean I would think that there's like a lot of like you kind of just laid out like this whole series of things that like need to be overcome to get to that point. And I would imagine that like it must be hard for that to happen. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, just that I'm sure it must be.
I think it's easier for volunteers that are younger because you're just more you're starting out your life. You know, you haven't maybe had your first job. And you know, so you don't have maybe the lifestyle that I had. And, you know, I mean, don't have maybe the direction that I knew I wanted to take my career in, and I love to travel and so it probably was easier for them. But for me, I mean, I'm like, not to mention just, I did go on to date someone else, and the major issue was communication, you know, with Senegalese men. They are, and it depends on the household, right? In my household, my first family, the father and the mother, they had great communication. Now he was hell on wheels and so was she, but great communication. They would talk about businesses and I mean, she would take up for him and he would take up for her. And so they had a great relationship that way. But the guy that I was dating, I mean, with men in general, when they say it's time, if you're having a conversation and when they say it's time to end it, whether you've resolved anything or not, it's over. And so he would just not want to continue talking. And I'm like, I can't be with someone that I can't have a conversation with and we can't resolve anything, right? And so I just had to let it go. But that's cultural differences.
Aaron, was there anything that you regretted bringing to the Senegal?
Sure. Yeah, I brought way too much crap. Way too much crap. But somebody, I think it was Hannah. She's somebody who was like a third year whenever I came in, and oh my gosh, Hannah is amazing. I told her when I left, I was like, Hannah, I don't know where I'm going in this life, but like if I ever have the chance to work with you again, the answer is automatically yes. Like she's just phenomenal, like at what she does. Um, Highly flexible person, and that's like key to surviving in Peace Corps is just to be 100% flexible 100% of the time is like ideal. You never make it that way, but ideal. She put me on a Facebook group for like the incoming next stage to help them with questions they had. She added me. I don't know what made her add me, but she did. And somehow, like right out the gate, I happened to be in my road town getting on that Wi-Fi. And like just an hour prior, some mom had gotten onto the group and was like, hey, my daughter is graduating. I was going to help her put together her Amazon list. What should she bring? What should she not bring? And somebody immediately answered with like the automatic list that like Peace Corps sends us for that specific country, Senegal. And I answered to that. And I was like, this is a very generic list that could have useful stuff for like maybe 75% of the stuff I didn't want to bring. If I had been like up north, it would have been a different situation. I would have been like, oh, I'm really glad I brought that thing then, because up north, it's a completely different climate. Or I'm with a completely different family, so we have different needs. So like, it's a good generic list, but it literally covers like every site need, and every site's so different that you just end up bringing a ton of crap. So I gave them the advice. I was like, assess your daily life right now and think of the things you like to do. And I was like, a good example is that I didn't realize I like to do my nails. And I don't mean like my nails aren't painted. I just like to keep them clean. I was on swim team when I was a kid. I don't like long nails. In fact, they're like just a little long right now. And it's annoying me super badly because I didn't grow up with this. This to me is long and gross and like I can't handle it. I feel like they're unclean. I happened to bring a nail kit with me, and I kept my feet really healthy and I kept my hands really healthy. That's like a personal thing, right? Like, I don't know what made me bring this little like hand and foot nail kit, but like it was one of my favorite things. It was the best way to take care of myself. Like I'd give myself like every third day, I would sit in my room on the cold concrete floor because it was hot as Hades outside, sit on the cold floor and do my hands and feet. I'm not painting them, not doing anything. I'm just keeping all the dirt out of them. I'm keeping them clean and short and nice and smooth. And that was important. I was like, that's a good example. Think of something that you like to do that you know for sure. Like I love sweatshirts. I wear sweatshirts year round. I grew up in Central Texas. So to me, Senegalese heat was just like a little bit hotter than Texas. Like it was not that big of a deal to me. What was a big deal was like post rainy season when like it was a different kind of heat and your clothes like sucked to you. If you've ever seen the movie African Queen with Katharine Hepburn, which is an old movie and I get it, but you'll notice in the movie, she's doing this a lot. She's pulling her shirt off of her because her shirt would suck to her body all the time. And that's what happens. I still love sweatshirts. I brought my favorite sweatshirt with me and I 0% regret that because deserts get cold at night. And at night, there's no cloud cover to help keep that heat, right? That the desert builds. So at night, there's no cloud cover and it's the desert. The wind whips across it. What's going to happen? You're going to drop temperature real fast. And 75 degrees all of a sudden becomes your cold. Man, I freaking love that sweatshirt. I don't regret bringing it one bit. So like, I wish I had thought about my list more like that. Like, what are the things I already love and use all the time that automatically should go in my bag? And at the same time, I never used my rain jacket, but had I just been like 2 sites further south, I probably would have used that rain jacket half the year. So like,
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
What's the craziest thing you saw while you were down there. Like, and I don't mean crazy like. I don't mean like let's. I mean like in a fun way. Please. I mean, if something really terrible happened and you want to talk about it, I'm here for you. But I don't want to drag up anything that's super super scary or anything. I just mean like what's like the craziest like fun thing, you know?
I mean, this is like doesn't even have to be a Peace Corps, but I was so thrown off. But I basically saw a 5-dog gangbang, and I was like, what the actual fuck? 'Cause the thing is the crazy part is I definitely took a photo. I have it still.
Let's see it.
You would, Brittany. You would.
Send it to me, and I'll use it for promo material.
Bro, I so will.
Fuck
I
yeah.
absolutely. It is fucked up because we were going on a hike, and like the thing is my host family, they love to hike, and we would get down with some hikes. I mean, like one hike we did 34 miles in a fucking day. They'd just be like, well, it's just an extra hour. And I'm like, bitch, I'm gonna fucking they said, well, this was the first time we've seen Brittany angry. I'm like, yeah, I've got blisters all over my fucking feet. And like yeah, that was
This is on a smaller scale, but my mom always wants to go for walks after Thanksgiving dinner. So I feel you. I fucking feel that so hard. I'm just like, I do not want to fucking walk anywhere right now. Hardly ever.
Yeah,
I'm fat. You know what I mean? It's not easy for me.
Yeah, and okay, so I'm a bigger person, and she's like, trespassing is like no big thing, like ain't no thing. And so you go underneath these fucking fence, like barbed wire fence, and I'm like, I am getting my ass is getting snagged under these fences. Like this is not for me, for the people. This is not okay. So yeah, that was the dare. So fucking pissed. But what
You saw this one of these hikes though led you to the 5-dog gangbang.
We were on the way, and there was this group of dogs, and they were like yapping, and it was like, what's happening? And I turned, and like so you know how dogs are, and you know they hook in, right? And so this one dog is like hooked in, but then this other dog is like humping, and it's like definitely thinking it's in, but it's not. And then these two other dogs are like, and oh my God, that was just like, for all dogs there's so much dog issues in Costa Rica. Like they tell you in training, like carry rocks, because like dogs will just come and attack you. And like it was like crazy. But just to see it, and then a 6.2 earthquake. I was walking to
How is that overshadowed by the dog gangbang? How is the 6.2 earthquake the second thing?
I totally forgot about the earthquake. There's so many I love earthquakes.
You took a picture of the dog gangbang and you're
welcome to my brain. What the hell? The earthquake was nuts though. I was walking to go get a little ice cream because my family was at the cemetery, which was even creepier. Like I feel bad for them. But literally the entire earth moved, and I like looked up, and there was this indigenous guy, and I was like, am I tripping, or like was this real? Like I don't really know. And he just like, and I'm like, okay, sure, yes, all right, yes,
this happened.
and then it was like I get a call from my host family. They're like, hey, if there's any aftershocks, and my host sister would always just be like, and like run outside immediately, like anything, and be like, Temblor! And she'd run outside, and I just pretend I'm like surfing. Like I thought they were cool, but yeah, I had never felt. Like, I mean, I'm the person, if there's a tornado, I'm sitting outside. I'm waiting for the green air and the hail.
Yeah, fuck that. What?
I like a good natural disaster if it doesn't happen to me, obviously. But like to see that much power by nature is so incredibly empowering and terrifying, and that it's like, whoa. But that earthquake, that gangbang.
I want to go back. I was just going to say, I want to go back to the gangbang for 1 second just to tell this story. I'm not in the Peace Corps, and this has nothing to do with the Peace Corps, but it so fits with this story that I have to tell it. So we used to live at this fucking house in Manchester, New Hampshire, and in Manchester, New Hampshire, there's a huge stray cat problem, like a massive stray cat problem, and we lived in like the like most tightly packed fucking apartment buildings, and for some reason our apartment building was the only one that had a backyard. So we had like this big backyard. We were surrounded by all these fucking apartment buildings, and every fucking cat would come, and they would have this huge orgy in our yard. So like it would be fucking like for 24 hours for like 2 weeks straight. You just hear like meow, meow, and like these cats were fucking in our yard just nonstop for fucking. It would happen for weeks, every like 6 months. Like it was all right. Anyways, so that's my fucking story. I would want to get back to what you guys thought was the craziest. Latrice, can you follow up with the dog gangbang with the craziest thing that you saw while in Senegal?
Well, so I'm gonna just take it from this perspective. So something that I would think that the average American would think that was odd, right? Which is the hitchhiking. So Peace Corps volunteers don't have cars. We take public transportation. You know, I lived in a city of 25 to 30,000, which sounds really large, except for it's all just houses and there's nothing else to do in the city, right? So, but we had a taxi stand, but we were on a major highway, and so it would take hours for the taxi to fill up, the long distance taxi. So my mother said, go to the road and thumb a ride. So one thing good about thumbing a few things. You thumb a ride, you can get a car quicker, and if you thumb a ride, you can generally get an air-conditioned car.
Oh, fuck yeah.
Ooh.
I feel like I did not have air conditioning for the first, after we graduated in December, from December to September, I felt like I did not have any air conditioning ever. Like literally I was dying of heat. There was a little store that I could go in my town, but anyway, so it was the hitchhiking. And then the other thing that's kind of cool about Senegalese communities is you can literally, if we went to Senegal now and we walked in to pick any person's house at lunchtime, they would greet you and they would say, come sit at the bowl. Peace Corps volunteers don't make a lot of money. And so there was a volunteer in the ag stage above me. And he was actually dating another volunteer and they got married. And she was like, yeah, literally this guy, whenever they travel, whenever they came to the city where our training facility was, and he was out, he would just walk into some random person's compound and greet and sit down and eat with them. And I think the average American would be like, what? Like you're just going to walk into my house and sit down and don't know them from Adam? Some white dude at that? Yep. Because he's speaking the local language, because he probably has on some local clothing, because, he's joking with them, in local language, so.
That's like a small thing, but like a big thing. You know what I mean? Like to them, it must be like kind of a small thing, but I'm trying to imagine just doing that for the first time, like walking in and be like, yo, where's the bowl at?
Well, I think that, to Senegalese, because if it was a Senegalese, yeah, but an American, because there's not a lot of Americans in Senegal, some white guy. So that, and they're probably incredulous that this guy is like walking into their compound anyway and speaking the local language as well as he does. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Is a lot of Senegal like that, like very like open and like sort of like just kind of giving Senegal, like that?
Yeah. Well, they're communal, and so very peaceful. So when you think about West Africa, right, you think about, unfortunately, countries like Mali, who is struggling with the word is escaping me, insurgency, excuse me. And you think about even in the southern part of Senegal on the border, you know, they have issues with cross-border issues, and volunteers weren't able to go there until right before Aaron came. And in, you know, countries like Burkina Faso, the insurgency has arrived, but Senegal is a very peaceful country. The people are very peaceful, and they're open, you know, to other religions, as long as the religions believe in a God, right? So Christianity, Judaism, you know, Islam, and so yeah, people in general are just very open, and just, you know, to inviting you in.
You had mentioned that you were introduced to the imam like at some point. Is that because like is religion like a big, in spirituality, is that like a big part of the culture that you have to like sort of get used to and like sort of adapt to?
Islam is a major part of the Senegalese culture. So, you know, I mean, in the U.S., you know, there is this separation of church and state, but I feel like in Senegal, you know, that religion is very interwoven, and so, you know, when you are introduced or want to be introduced into any community, you're not just meeting, you know, the village chief or the mayor, you're also meeting the religious leader as well. You know, one fun fact about Senegal is when HIV started becoming prevalent and growing across the world, they approached the religious community. And the religious community is the one that actually was able to talk to people, you know, to say, hey, you know, this disease, it's nothing to mess with, you know, wrap it up, blah, 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 or whatever. So, you know, their HIV rates were a lot less than other countries, nations.
That is interesting. Aaron, what's the craziest thing you ever saw? Sorry, I got distracted by my cat doing something weird over there.
Neither of these things I saw.
Well, that doesn't count.
Okay. Actually, I learned this from Delaney. Latrice, I can't remember though. What's the word to curtsy?
Don't know.
Oh man, I can't remember.
Because I did not curtsy. I'm an older.
Yeah. So I should back up.
Woman.
Yeah. Well, I should back up and explain. It is common practice to for a woman to shake hands with a man and maybe do like a tiny little curtsy. Not all the time. It's not expected for you to do it every single time, but it's a sign of respect. People do kind of expect it at some point. And I learned this from Delaney, who was a friend of ours. And this is what the reason I'm backing up is because I have to be here. Look, I need a chair and everything. So like there was, here, you can't even see. Let's do this.
No, we can see you.
We got you.
Okay. So there was a gentleman who was like shaking my hand. Now we were just shaking hands. And back behind me were like a bunch of women and kids. And they were doing their own thing. Like they were sitting and maybe cooking or like washing a dish or whatever they were doing. They're doing their daily business and they're all just kind of back behind me, shaking hands with this man. And there's a few other men behind him. And he's talking to me and I understand him for the most part, but he is speaking quickly. But he's telling me, he's like, why aren't you bowing to me? Why aren't you bowing? And he keeps asking me. And so as I'm shaking his hand, I'm like, what are you saying? What do you mean? What are you saying? Like, what's this word? I don't know this word. And he keeps saying the word louder and louder. And I'm just like, wahatal, like repeat. I don't understand. And finally, I'm like, show me what you mean. And he's like, well, curtsy. And he like kind of does like a little bow. And I was like, I still don't understand. Like I was faking it, right? I was just like, I don't understand what you want from me. And like all the women, I start hearing them snicker. And I'm like, they know what I'm up to. And I like look over the man's shoulder and I see my farmer and he's looking at me and he's just like, you Sai, which is like, you troublemaker. And I was like, we're doing this. Because like I could just tell, I was like, we're doing it. We're doing it to this guy. And so finally, the guy finally does, like, instead of a bow, he finally puts his foot behind and like, what is this? Show me again. I don't know what this is. He's like, how can you not know? He's like all distraught. And he's like, and he shows me again, and he like really does it. The women start laughing because they know what I've done, right? They're like, oh my gosh, no, she didn't. I was like, I see you're really good at that. Oh my gosh, like it was so great. Like everybody was roaring. It was like a total thing. It was just so great because I was just like, I'm not fucking curtsying to nobody. I will say, I did really love my imam, and so when I left and I went to say goodbye to him, I did curtsy to him because I wanted him to see that, like, even in my short time being with him, that I saw how hard he worked to take care of his community and how hard he worked to take care of his family and how much he accepted me. So I was like very, very thankful for that. And we had some great conversations, like one of which was he was talking to Delaney and he asked Delaney, he said, why don't you have a husband? And she was like, well, her reason, she like went with like the Muslim faith as it's practiced in Senegal. And she's like, well, I'm worried that if I had a husband, he would have more wives. And she was like, what about if I want multiple husbands? So like she was like bantering with him to see where he would go with it. And he was like, well, if you had, had a kid, whose child would it be if you had multiple husbands? And she was like, well, it would be God's kid. And he was like, good answer. And like he didn't correct her. He didn't tell her she was a bad person for thinking that. He was like, I like that. That's a good answer. And it was like he was open to having like those fun conversations and like thinking through things. And I really appreciated that about him. And then I curtsied the whole last week. I knew it was my last week, but I was trying not to like really let it be known that it was my last week. I curtsied to Sheikh every time I saw him because I wanted the community to understand that like I really adored him and I looked up to him and he meant a lot to me. And my language would be nowhere without him. And I wouldn't have had a friend had I not had Sheikh. So I was like very open about curtsying to him. And like I'm taller than Sheikh. So like it was kind of probably obvious to people. They're probably like, okay. But I really, those are the two people who I curtsy to Sheikh on a regular basis the last week I was there. So that's like the one thing that was me. Brittany, do you remember the story Brienne told though? What Brienne was in Romania?
Albania.
Okay. She's like in training and she's with a bunch of her other Peace Corps volunteers and they're at a street and she can see out of the corner of her eye like a truck coming, like running a red light. So she throws her arm out and she's like, stop. And she just yells stop to them. And everybody around her just like whips their head around and looks at her. And they're like, what is going on? Turns out the word stop in Albania is the same word as penis. She just shouted out penis in the middle of the street. She was like, I was there, 3 weeks. Like, what did I know? I barely started learning the language. But yeah, she was like, yeah, so at my training community, I was the girl who was known for yelling penis.
Oh, and she's just the cutest little baby.
It's a tiny little thing. Oh my goodness.
Oh, good for her.
Yeah. I wasn't there for that obviously, but I love that.
It sounds like, even though like, I feel like a lot of the conversations because I did do a little bit of research here before I came into this, and it seems like a lot of the conversations are all around like these like real lofty ideas, and there's like a lot of very serious talk, and there's like a lot of like it almost feels like I don't really know how to put it, but it almost feels like it's like up on this pedestal, or like the ideas and like the things that you're doing, it's almost like a holier than, or like a, you know what I mean? It's like, it seems like it's a real big deal, but it sounds like you guys have a lot of fun. It sounds like it's more fun than maybe the advertising would make it appear.
I think it would be traumatic to all, but after Peace Corps, you just go, that's funny. Trauma's funny. But I I mean, different lenses. That's all Peace Corps talks about. They'll wank you off about different lenses, and it's just the way you think about things. And I think going through that, you're grounded in so many different ways that you're like, not. I mean, you're jaded afterwards. You're just, this is life. So I don't know. I mean, it is a hell of a lot of fun because when else would you do things like that? I mean, like I had to kill a chicken. Like when would I do that in the US? I had to do all this weird stuff, and it's like, or like, yeah, just like obeying Peace Corps rules too, and then everyone, it's just an interesting world that you're kind of shoved into. So it's it was, the thing is I'm honestly thinking about reapplying because I'm like, if I get done with school, I don't want to go back to having an actual job. Like jobs fucking suck.
Oh, they do suck so
And
bad.
they suck so bad. And like this is the one thing I felt like I was empowered. I empowered other people. I never had, I mean, like it's always rough, but like I enjoyed my day to day. It was stressful in different ways. It was more of like, how do I get these people to communicate? Not like, oh, fuck, I need to probably put in 14 hours to do this, this, and this. Like, then what is my purpose? So Peace Corps really gives you an opportunity to figure out you and to grow and to give you that headspace and time to just, I don't know, expand. So I'm like definitely looking at like, well, what is response? Because there's all different types of Peace Corps service now that like you could do a technical thing. I've done a virtual thing. I hated that. But something response, it's just, I don't know. As much as it's like you want to freaking wring the neck of the entire thing about it, you're like, I'd do that again. This shit's tight, it's so cool. Like, when would you ever have this type of opportunity to just pick up, go do something, and then come back? It's weird.
I'd like to just point out that killing a chicken also lower than the dog gangbang on your list of crazy shit you did in another country.
I have a really shit memory. So I gotta pull things out because, man, I know I've got some weird, but that gangbang, it really is like literally engraved in my brain. And I even emailed you guys the picture, and these dogs are looking
I
at me.
appreciate it.
But they know that I know that we are like, what?
This is happening.
I would imagine the first 2 weeks in country, when you like first like start changing over your diet, must be terrible. Like I have IBS, so I think I have this is one area where I think I may have an idea of what you guys went through. Holy shit. I'm sorry for your internal organs.
It was 9 months.
9 months?
So, well, and I think in Senegal, I like to say this, and I don't know if Erin agrees, that we cook in the US, we cook with a lot of butter. In Senegal, they cook with a lot of oil. And so one, the oil was making my stomach turn. And two, when I got to my site, we eat with our family. And so the mother is the one cooking the meals and so different food preparation techniques. So your stomach is turning. And so it took 6 months. And so for me, I like to say that the Peace Corps gives you a medical kit on steroids. So if you can imagine, Peace Corps volunteers are 2 years away. So this medical kit has Imodium in it, but it has the strong stuff in it too. And I used all of mine every single time I got on the road 2 hours, right? I would take it because my stomach was constantly turning, and I wanted to make sure that I didn't
Because you can't pull over.
yeah, there's no place. It's not like in the US, right? There is no bathrooms on the road. There might be, well, definitely there was no bathrooms on the road. I mean, if you're taking longer distance trips, we would when I went to, there might be a bathroom 6 hours away at a gas station. But yeah, you're holding it. So,
So just last question for you guys before we sign off here. I know, like, so me and Aaron have been friends now for a few years, and like we know each other, but like we don't know each other. Like we know each other on the internet, but like the transformation that she made from the person that she was to the person that she is today, and like she may not even realize how huge of a transformation she made. I don't know if she does or not, but it's fucking like I feel like it's two different people, honestly. Like in an unbelievable way that is almost like it almost seems as though like she got body snatched and fucking they sent back like a clone or something. I don't know. She's like a totally different person, and I fucking can tell that having never even met her. Do you guys feel like you, Brittany and Latrice and Aaron too, do you guys feel like you were transformed by the Peace Corps in a positive way or in a negative way, in a neutral way?
I went soft, I would like to say. I mean, like, I graduated with international business with Spanish and communications. I was ready to like take on the business world and like, and then, you know, I had this job. I worked in construction, and then I was pretty cutthroat, like pretty logical, you know, emotion aside, like, sorry, you gotta put your dog down, you know? And then after Peace Corps, I'm like, do you want to talk about it? Like, you know, it's like, and I used to make fun of these YD and, you know, the youth people, because they'd be like, you know, do you need a talking stick? And they do a waterfall. They're like, you know, and I'm like, oh my God, fucking Peace Corps people. And, you know, we'd be like, oh, well, we're community development, like we're hard. But then honestly, Peace Corps, there's some, it really just, I don't know if it broke me down that like I rebuilt and it was just I'm a little more tender, but I feel a lot more, and I feel like I've explored so much more than I would ever think. Like I'm just open to all these possibilities, because I feel like Peace Corps just says you could do anything and go anywhere now. Like nothing, there's no limits. Do whatever you want. But it's also saying never go get a real job. This is so much better. So, you know, hey, there's best of both worlds. I don't know.
Aaron?
I feel bad like following that up. I'm about to, I guess, probably admit some things that I've never said out loud, which is
Awesome. That's a Nick Sands Presents exclusive right there coming up here.
I mean, it's not gonna be the most positive comments. You know, I think I did make 14-year-old me proud. I do. I think 14-year-old me would look back on this moment and go, you finally applied, you finally, you know, packed your bag and left. Like, good for you. Like, this is what I went and got a degree for. You know, like everything from the age of 14 on was to go do the Peace Corps. And I had really wonderful people around me, but whatever. So I should side note, I should admit that I struggle with anxiety and depression, but like I had worked really hard for years to like not only get that under control, but get it to the point where it was like seemingly non-existent in my life. Like my meds were really great. I had been to therapists for a really long time. I had a lot of tools in my tool belt. If you've never seen the movie Stutz, like on Netflix, go watch it. With what's his name? Jonah Hill. Get yourself some tools for your toolkit, your mental health toolkit. It's super freaking helpful. Build a mental health toolkit. So I had a great one. And that was one of the reasons why it took medical a long time to clear me, is because they were really concerned, like, can you mentally handle this? I did not realize how badly it would trigger my anxiety, because I have traveled internationally, and I have been internationally for longer periods of time than just a couple of days. And I've been in situations where I'm like the only white person needing help with a translator to communicate with the community I'm in. Like none of that was foreign to me. I've backpacked long enough where I've had to go 5 days without a shower. So I was like, cool, nitty gritty. Like I know what I can handle and what I can't. I feel like I can handle this. Something about the social situation though, like Latrice was saying earlier, how she didn't, for like a year, she felt like she didn't have that like full breath. And I think that's probably what would have happened to me. Every day I came home, I was trying to find a way to take a breath, and I couldn't find a way to take a breath. Even on my best days, if you're introverted and you have very high anxiety that's being triggered, and you're like, I haven't had this high of anxiety in years, and you can't get it to reduce, it just builds every day, and you're not catching your breath. It really worked me over. So I remember when I came back home, I don't know how to explain it other than it was like I felt nervous and shaky internally. Like I didn't look it, like my hands didn't shake, my body didn't shake, but internally everything felt like on edge. And it took me probably about 8 or 9 months when I first remembered going, I feel like I'm off the edge of the nervousness that I was constantly feeling. And I know that probably sounds weird. I don't know how to explain that. So as much as I love the Peace Corps, if I do it again, I'd like to do it with a partner, with a spouse. I do not think that for my personality, it was or anybody who has a personality like me, I'm not telling you not to go do it. I'm telling you to really think about it. And maybe find a way to either be partnered somehow close by, like ask if you can be, that volunteer that's like 30 minutes from another volunteer. They will try and accommodate weird things like that. Like I had stomach problems that they were concerned about. They were totally fine while I was in Peace Corps, but like it meant that I was closer to the Capitol because they were like, uh-oh, what about if our stomach problems kick in? I have horrible poop stories. I can tell you awful poop stories.
I do too, Aaron.
But,
you're not special. I already admitted to everybody I have IBS.
Yeah, but it was never so bad that I had to like go to the Capitol to med bay for like my stomach. So like I was fine. It was really my anxiety that like took me for a really big ride. Do I think it changed my life? Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think Peace Corps opened up a lot of doors for me that it would not have opened up otherwise post Peace Corps, which was I was able to apply to multiple universities for my master's degree. I got into everything I applied for with a fellows program. And then I would call the fellows programs and interview them. And I got in at Western Illinois University, or I chose Western Illinois University because they had the most hands-on of all of the fellows programs that I had applied to. I felt like they were the most hands-on. We do AmeriCorps work while we're in school full time, and we're in our community serving. Like the service never ended, like the service aspect of life just continues on, and you take everything you've learned and keep pushing it forward. And I manage more projects in service than I do at work. It's like my work is so tentative with me. They're like, oh, here, we'll give you a little something. Peace Corps and AmeriCorps, they're like, here's the project, go do it, boo. Like we don't have time to hold your hand. And all of a sudden you're running like a massive project and it's you. And so like Peace Corps gave me that finally. I had never fully done a project start to finish all on my own. And that was what was happening in Peace Corps. And that's for sure what happened in my AmeriCorps service. So I basically got a master's for free because of the fellows program at WIU for Peace Corps, AmeriCorps fellows, which is awesome. Peace Corps opens a lot of doors. I just don't think that for my personality, it would be a smart thing for me to do it again unless I'm with a spouse.
I'll say from my perspective on just you going and coming back, it seems as though when you had mentioned earlier how like you looked into the future and you saw yourself in 5 years and you were, it seemed so bleak. And I don't know if you realize this, but that came across like you and me, we didn't just like see each other's posts on Facebook. Like you and me had conversations. We talked a few times, and like there was definitely something in you that it seemed as though like you had almost resigned yourself to that life. And then I remember when you like kind of had mentioned something big's coming. You and I talked. You were gonna go to Japan, and then you weren't able to. And then you and I had been talking, and you were like, "Well, I think I'm gonna join the Peace Corps." And then I was like, oh, that's cool. And then following you along. And then now to see you seem like so driven, you seem so sure, you seem like you have so much confidence, and like none of you, it didn't feel like you had any of that. Like it really feels like you have like purpose and drive, and like you've always been a very kind and giving person, from what I can tell. And like every time I talk to you, you're always fucking doing some fucking nice thing for somebody, making everybody else look bad. But like you just
Amen.
you like, it really feels like you either found something inside of you that you didn't know was there, or you maybe found a reason to live or something. I don't know, but the way it changed you is very obvious and dramatic, as for someone who doesn't know you that well.
It definitely was a start of like a new domino effect for me, and I'm really thankful. Again, I hear some people talk about like their stages or their cohorts, and they're like, man, my stage was crappy, or like my cohort people were crappy. I did not have that experience. Like, was I friends with everybody in my stage? No, there was 75 of them. Like, how could I make friends with all of them? But the people I made friends with, or the people I learned from, like I got to learn from Latrice, and like she kind of held my hand a little bit. Delaney came along and kind of held my hand a little bit. Hannah never really held my hand, but she had great wisdom and insight to share, and she was willing to share it. Like I had people around me from a certain point on that were like teaching me without realizing that they were teaching me the things that like I needed to hear at that point in my life, or understand about myself and the current situation I was in, so that I could handle it better. I don't know if they realized that they were doing it, but they were. And again, it was just like that domino effect. There were some things that then continued to happen after Peace Corps, and the people I met after Peace Corps that at certain times played really key roles into me taking probably a more drastic step into being like comfortable in my own skin and being okay with who I am. And I remember last year during summer, I called my mom and I was like, Mom, I think I've met myself today. I was like, it sounds so weird and hippy dippy, but I was like, I feel like I met myself today. Like, I don't think I knew who I was until today. And she was like, okay. And I was like, I'm 38 years old. And she's like, some people never meet themselves. And I was like, oh,
Damn,
fuck,
Mom,
that's
dropping wisdom on fucking people.
Yeah. Yeah. My mom is bomb. My mom is bomb. But yeah, she was like, she said that. And I remember like feeling okay with meeting myself. Like I was like, I'm not embarrassed of myself. This is good. Okay. Okay. This is good. Like, so yeah, I think Peace Corps definitely was like a huge tipping point, like a domino effect of really great things, but really hard things, but necessary. I wouldn't have gotten here without the Peace. Oh, well, I probably would have, but it would have been like 15 years from now if I had made it that long. I was definitely not on the road to making it that long. So.
Well, I'm glad that you're here.
Me too. Latrice?
And Latrice?
On you.
So Aaron, definitely love your story, and I can relate, because the Peace Corps was life-changing for me. I think that, and it was hard. So Brittany, Senegal was not Posh Corps. I might have said this earlier, but for volunteers who are thinking about going, it's a great post was the word I was trying to think of earlier. Each country has a post, so it's a great post. They have a great training program, all that, but it definitely is, it's hard. And I probably had one of the easier locations, but I kind of discovered myself spiritually while I was there. I think life happens. I grew up in a conservative household and got married and divorced young and swore I was going to hell for all of my 20s. And so it kind of forced me away from Christianity, and I couldn't figure out how to get back to it. And so now I say my spirituality is a mix. Christianity, Buddhism, it is a mix, but I am, I'm just, so I discovered, my spirituality while I was there. And when I went to Senegal, I said, you know what, I'm going to just look into religion just because it's an Islamic country, so I read, Islam, the book Islam for Dummies. But one of my friends turned me on to the law of attraction, which is what you put out, what you put out in the world, you get back. I was actually struggling with Cher when I first got there, Aaron. Um, it was, and so I just, threw compassion at the man, sat and drank, sipped tea with him, under the tree for months on end. And, I'm the one, that, and they often say Peace Corps volunteers get back more than they ever give. And so I'm the one that, was changed spiritually. Peace Corps even though I was an introvert and I couldn't, get into my shell far enough, you still are surrounded by so many volunteers, right? I have 3 volunteers that were lucky for me. They were in my region. When I went to Peace Corps, I was 46, 47. The volunteers were Caucasian girls. One was 24, one was 25, and one was 27. And I've said to them, when would I ever have been friends with you? Friends, not just associates, but friends, classmates. We still have Facebook. We're on Facebook Messenger. We're on Instagram Messenger daily, sending each other jokes, asking questions, looking at, resumes for each other, yada, yada, yada. I would have never, ever made friends with them. And quite honestly, I was concerned about, going to a service and being isolated as an older Black woman, surrounded by volunteers that I knew were going to be right out of college. And quite honestly, the volunteers party hard. It's oftentimes, but I got lucky enough to be with some very, young but mature. Oh my gosh, we had some amazing conversations, and I just learned a lot from them, right? And so they in themselves kind of taught me how to be a better friend. And that's just a couple of examples, but it was very transformational for me. And I came out a better person on the other end. And really at the end of my service knew that I was moving in the right direction, right? I wanted to work in international development. I know that that's what I want to do. I want to, work socially. I know that that's what I want to do, and so Peace Corps service gave that to me. And not to mention, she talked about relations, and I just talked about those 3, but, I call the Peace Corps Mafia, because Erin and I, we hadn't chatted a lot since we returned, but when her friend was coming to DC and, the friend's friend caught COVID and she needed a place to stay. And I said before Peace Corps, Latrice would have said, there's no way, like, I live in a 485 square foot apartment. How is someone else going to come stay with me? But the after Peace Corps, Latrice was like, yeah, come on, and then when I had the opportunity to go stay in some Peace Corps volunteers' house that I had no idea about, right, in New York, I went to New York, and Erin's friend, Courtney, stayed, with her friend in my apartment for another few days, and so Peace Corps service, it's just the service that keeps on giving. And I know that I could reach to Brittany, and say, hey, Brittany, do you know so-and-so, or can you help me out, or can I sleep on your couch, or whatever. And she would be willing to do that. And I would definitely be willing to do that for Peace Corps volunteers as well. So, and I am only thankful that we are having this service, this conversation, 4 years after, because I was much more cynical as I was leaving service. I was hot. I was tired of Senegalese taxi drivers, but I've had the opportunity to reflect and, have weekly conversations with Shea, and it's just, it was an amazing experience.
I think of what I find most impressive about you, Latrice, is that you didn't really, this wasn't, you had a life, you had a real setup. You were saying, you had your retirement money from the military, you were a professional person, you were and you held on to your furniture, but you really kind of went out on a limb in a way that I think was probably harder than it is for people with less kind of
I
solid
think
ground.
that I hear where you're going, but what I see and what I think about myself is, I think the average American, first of all, I'm divorced with no kids, so that makes it easier. But you have a lot of Americans, but by the time they get to my age, they're married, they have kids, they've reached to a certain level, a salary level that they don't feel like they can let go of it. And I would encourage, anybody to follow their passion or their dream. And so for me, as a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force, I mean, the salary is quite good. But what I knew at an early age, that money wasn't going to be everything for me, right? I knew, and I still feel this way, that there's a purpose for me on this earth. I feel like it's international work. I feel like it's social work. And I needed to let go of the military service in order to get where, and I'm still in that process, right? And so a lot of times we feel anxious or anxiety or unhappy where we are because that's not the space that we're supposed to be in. Like Brittany said, she went to Peace Corps and now she's like, I don't want a 9 to 5. Your heart is happy when you let go of that space you're not supposed to be in and you start moving in the direction. And so that's why it was easier for me to go to the Peace Corps, right? Because I actually work in international development now. I don't know how long I've been talking, but another story.
As long as you want, keep going. I'm here for it.
As we wrap up, so my second year as a Peace Corps volunteer, I work for Kansas State University. So the director and associate director that I work for came to Peace Corps Senegal to talk to us about some work that they wanted to do with Peace Corps volunteers. They didn't get a chance to get finished. They ran out of time. They tacked the discussion on the end of another conference that they were giving. And so I was very interested because it was about, we were doing focus groups, and I was very interested in focus groups and them coming to our communities to work with us. And so at the end of I guess day one or something, I asked a question and they forced me to lead a focus group. And remind you, I said my language literally just arrived. So how am I leading a focus group and my language is shit, right? I had to write everything down. I had to remember the questions. But to make a long story short, because of my interest in the work, they actually ended up coming. They partnered a master's degree student with me, and she came to work in the to do her research in the fields with my farmers. And then when I got back to the US, that director and that associate director called me to come work for them. So I work for Kansas State University. The work that I'm doing is focused in West Africa. I've been to Senegal once with K-State. I'm going back to Senegal this summer for an annual meeting. I'm going to Kenya in May with the associate director. So because of the work that I did in Senegal, I was able to, and I thought I was going to have to actually look for a job, and I haven't looked for a job in 30 years. I didn't have to look for a job. And so here I am working for K-State. So it's just, I think that when you are moving in the direction you're supposed to move in, and it's hard when you are, you're putting in the work, then these things, they happen. So
that's amazing. What a perfect lesson to end on. Yeah. Guys, thank you so much for coming today. Thank you so much to everybody who watched. Thank you so much to Empire Mortgage for your sponsorship. And is there anything, guys, where can people find you? Where do you want them to find you? Is there anything I can do? Do you have anything to plug? Just go. Feel free to send people wherever you want them.
I have a cool Instagram from when I did Peace Corps. It's called Costa Rica Coffee Buzz, and it's all about me living on a coffee farm and kind of the process of coffee, because I'm super horny for coffee. So Costa Rica Coffee Buzz on Insta.
I think for me, I'm just not as active on LinkedIn, but becoming more active. So, if people want to hit me up, if they have questions about Peace Corps, questions about working in international development, and how to get here, you can hit me up, Latrice Taylor, on LinkedIn, and we can chat or reach out to Nick. I mean, he now knows how to get a hold of me, so absolutely willing to talk to people and share.
I was going to say the same thing. It's my full name, though, on LinkedIn, Erin Chapelham. My middle name is Chapel after Chapel Hill, North Carolina, not because my parents are religious. And then Ham with one M, not with two. So, and then if you can't get a hold of me on LinkedIn or something, get a hold of Nick. Nick knows how to get a hold of me. But I talk to either people who are about to become Peace Corps volunteers, like they're thinking about applying, or their parents. Like I just had a Zoom with a woman and her daughter probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, and they were out of Washington, and I don't know how they got my name, but they did. Emailed me, messaged me through Facebook, and my name somehow is like going around on Facebook as a good person to contact. I think it's because of a comment I made on a post, and like a bunch of people, like the comment kind of went slightly viral. It's like got liked like 1,000 times or something.
Wow.
So yeah, and so people I think are contacting because of that comment, and asking if they can get more information. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. So I Zoom with people all the time. I give them 30 minutes. Unless we can't cover everything in 30 minutes, then we set like another 30-minute Zoom coffee date. So I'm here for it. AmeriCorps, Peace Corps, like obviously we're talking about Peace Corps, but like Brittany and I have both done AmeriCorps. Brittany's still in it. Who knows? I might do AmeriCorps again. Like I really liked AmeriCorps. I would like to do some really specific food insecurity projects with AmeriCorps. I think that'd be great. So
I think my last comment for you guys is thank you, Erin, for thinking of me. When you were looking at the podcast, and Nick, thanks for having me on. I mean, I've really enjoyed the conversation and chatting with you, Erin, and Brittany.
Yeah, no, I super appreciate you guys coming on. Honestly, this wouldn't have happened without Erin, so really appreciate her. So basically what happened is I'm an idiot, and I like when I look at a calendar, it literally looks like it's in another language. Like for some reason when I look at like dates and like times and like stuff like that, it literally just looks like it could not exist. I fucking can't decipher it. So I missed. I was supposed to schedule someone for today, and I didn't. And I just made a post earlier this week about if anyone wants to come on. And Erin was like, well, it's the fucking Peace Corps' birthday this week. And like I could put together some people that would come on, and then fucking now I made 2 new friends. So like this was a good day for me. I fucking really appreciate you guys coming on and hanging out with me. And if there's ever anything I can do for you, please let me know.
I've had a great time. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Definitely appreciate it.
All right, everybody, you heard where to go contact them. If you need to, hit me up and I will put you in touch with them. Until next week, thank you so much. And